Okay, okay. I have to get my mic set up. How's my voice coming in? Bomb Cherry, I sent you the Hangout link. Check the Hangout chat. Black in Japan, what's good? Adrian Thomas, what's good with you? Zero Divide in the building. We just waiting on our panel members. Neon Eyes. Hey, Neon Eyes. Uh, if you want to get on the panel, Neon Eyes, put your link in the chat. I know I talked to you last night. Dave Tao, what's good with you? You said not Bomb Cherry. Hey, this was Bomb Cherry's idea. This is a so essentially I had I posted a video. Actually, I did an actual live stream with BGS Itmore. I believe it was last week, and the discussion topic was Roe versus Wade revisited. Reason why I titled it Roe versus Wade revisited is because uh, some of you may or may not be familiar with the Supreme Court precedent of Roe versus Wade, which reaffirmed women's rights as far as abortion is concerned. So this particular live stream that I did with BGS, we revisited the issue of Roe versus Wade since um, Supreme Court Justice vacancy uh, may be coming into fruition pretty soon. So um, Donald Trump, of course, has the authority to appoint a Supreme Court justice, and I'd imagine the Supreme Court justice he appoints will be a pro-life uh, a pro-life justice, and that will tip the scales, and I believe it will facilitate pro-life states such as Ohio, in particular, um, submitting a repeal of the Roe versus Wade judgment, which would um, actually oppose women's rights and put stricter guidelines for abortion. And as far as Neon Eyes, you said anything of value? Well, it's a woman's perspective is of value. The reason why I believe it's relevant to revisit this topic is because the previous stream it was just myself and BGS. Both of us are men, and of course we're gonna have a perspective that reflects that. So that's why I believe it's advantageous to get a woman's perspective on this particular topic. So I'm just going to give you guys a quick backdrop again, just while we wait for the panel members. Just going to give you a couple of facts about abortion to give context to this discussion. So, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, abortion is the termination of a pregnancy after, accompanied by, resulting in, or closely following the death of the embryo or fetus, such as a spontaneous abortion, a spontaneous expulsion of the human fetus during the first 12 weeks of gestation, or induced expulsion of human fetus. So when we look at abortion and miscarriage, there are some parallels between the two. When we speak of abortion in this particular context, we're referring to abortion that is, I would guess, an induced abortion. So an abortion that would not have necessarily occurred naturally, but it was induced by either a medical practitioner or even induced by a non-professional, which does occur. actually, what you would call illegal abortion occurs more frequently than legal abortions do. So when we talk about pregnancy, it's usually 37 weeks gestation. That's what you consider full term. So anything before 37 weeks is going to be considered premature. And yes, there are neonites. There are self-induced abortions. They're very, very prevalent. Usually, the induced abortions are assisted by another person, and there's all sorts of methods people utilize to induce the abortion. I don't want to go into all that because it's so many. Um, but yeah, the actual abortions that are illegal uh, are more than illegal abortions. So when we look at the actual statistics, most of those reflect what you would consider legal abortion. So those are abortions that are performed by a medical professional. So only about 30 to 50% of conceptions go past the first 3 months. And 3 months is considered a trimester. So we have 3 trimesters in a pregnancy. And let me see here. Okay. I got you, Shantastic. So only about 30 to 50% of conceptions go past the first 3 months. So that means a 50 to 70% rate of miscarriage. So without actual abortions, uh, the population generally loses 50 to 70% of pregnancies. So the pregnancy itself that is carried to full term is in itself a miracle already without human intervention. So then when we take those remaining 30 to 50% of pregnancies, then we start talking about abortions on those remaining pregnancies. So without what you consider spontaneous abortions and without uh, induced abortions, the population will probably be out of control because we already see that. I would imagine by my calculations, there probably is only about maybe 15%, 15 to 20% of pregnancies actually go full term. When you start calculating in uh, miscarriages and induced abortions. So here's the key fact, and this is very, very relevant. I want y'all guys to remember this actual number: 24. Okay, 24 is the number of weeks where an actual fetus is generally considered viable outside of the womb. Let me say that again. 24 weeks is generally considered the viability milestone outside of the womb. So at 24 weeks and beyond, now remember, this number fluctuates depending on the health of the mother, her nutritional intake, and genetic factors and the actual fetus growth rate. But at 24 weeks and beyond, with current medical technology, there is a significant survivability rate of the fetus. And remember that there are abortions performed after 24 weeks. Uh, so I'm gonna just go mifepristone, misoprostol, and methotrexate. Those are three of the more commonly used drugs that are used to induce abortion by medical means. So, and basically, these drugs, they work in conjunction. It's generally two or more drugs that are used together, and they essentially make the uterus unviable to carry the pregnancy. So that's just one component, and then another component is that it causes your body to go into labor early. So you expel the fetus and the uterus contents. That particular method is generally pretty effective, although there are times when uh, the uterine contents are not fully expunged, and so there may be some additional medical treatment to get the uterine contents out. And sometimes it doesn't necessarily terminate the pregnancy. And this is why when you actually do methods like that, it's best to go through an actual medical professional so you can get follow-up and ensure that the pregnancy is terminated. Because if not, that pregnancy can be carried to full term. And once you actually utilize those particular drugs, an extremely, extremely high rate of deformities, extremely high rate of abnormalities with that fetus. You're almost guaranteed to have a deformed and abnormal child if you take what you would consider abortion drugs and the actual fetus isn't completely terminated. Then you also have the surgical means, manual suction, vacuum suction, and dilation and evacuation. Those are just some of the ways. And then also hysterotomy, which is very similar to a hysterectomy. I'm sorry, very similar to a cesarean birth, except for you're actually removing a fetus before viability. So let's look back in the chat. Okay, so Neon Eyes, that is a perspective. Lando Calrissian, what's up? Neon Eyes, that's a perspective. You know, that's a perspective. You know, that's a very relevant perspective. Neon Eyes says, I really don't have much of a viewer perspective. I disagree. I think it is a viewer perspective. I just think it's very dishonorable when women consistently make irresponsible decisions with their womb, then turn to abort every time they get pregnant. Okay, and that's a very very relevant perspective. You know, in my opinion. Okay. So let's go. Okay, so this kind of ties into the next issue. When we talk about some of the reasons for abortion, sometimes there's the actual pregnancy may be harmful to health. So one of the primary reasons why a pregnancy would be harmful to health, to the woman's health, is if there's what you would consider a tubal pregnancy. And with the tubal pregnancy, when we talk about the woman's anatomy, you have the actual ovaries, and they're adjacent to, I think they're called fibrae, but they're like they look like little fingers that are at the ends of the fallopian tubes. And the actual ovaries secrete ovum, which is the actual egg, and it traverses the length of the fallopian tube and makes its way to the uterus. Now, if there's sperm introduced into the uterus, the sperm will go through the cervix and will attempt to travel up the fallopian tube to meet the ovum as the ovum descends. And then at that point, it will actually fertilize the ovum to create a zygote. Now, this particular ovum, as it traverses the fallopian tube, sometimes can implant into the fallopian tube. And there's various reasons why. It could be just totally random, or there could be some type of adhesions within the fallopian tube. A lot of times, untreated sexually transmitted diseases will increase the rate of tubal birth, or actually not tubal birth, but tubal pregnancy. Once that actual ovum implants into the actual fallopian tube, that ovum will actually convert to a zygote and will begin to develop and grow. Now, the actual fallopian tubes are very, very narrow, and they don't have very much elasticity. So as that zygote grows and turns into a fetus, it becomes too large for the fallopian tube to accommodate, which can cause a rupture. And the actual fallopian tube and the uterus are extremely vascular. With a rupture like that, very, very high mortality rate for the mother. 100% mortality rate if she doesn't seek immediate medical attention. So if she has a rupture and she's, out on the road and she can't get to a hospital, guaranteed she'll die. So this is one of the reasons why you will actually have an abortion. And what you would have is an extensive procedure. Oftentimes, what they would sometimes do is what's called a um, salping salpingectomy or salping oophorectomy. And a salping refers to the actual fallopian tube, salpingectomy. So whenever we see ectomy in medical terms, that means a removal. So a salpingectomy or salping oophorectomy means that you remove either the fallopian tube alone or the fallopian tube and the actual ovary. So of course, that's going to affect the actual fertility rate of the mother. Now, a woman can still get pregnant with one fallopian tube and one ovum. I mean, one ovary, but it does decrease a woman's fertility rate if you remove the fallopian tube and the actual ovary. So that's something to consider. Child mortality or morbidity. So sometimes the actual child may have some sort of congenital defect, or for whatever reason, there may be growth retardation within the actual uterus, and is determined by a medical professional that that child won't likely be viable. Either they'll die in uterus, which can create additional problems if the woman can't expel that fetus on her own. You know, a dead fetus within the uterus causes infection and stuff like that. Or the child will die, you know, sometime after birth. It won't have a long life expectancy. And, you know, that's very hard for parents to deal with. You know, not only the child not being able to live long, but the medical care associated with maintaining that child until that child's untimely demise. So sometimes it's determined by the parents to go ahead and abort the fetus prior to that. Multiparent reduction. So you have issues with women who have multiple birth pregnancies. So if you have say for instance, multigravida, which, you know, like somebody who has twins, generally twins are able to be carried without too many problems. When you start talking about triplets, quadruplets, quintuplets, you know, sextuplets, septuplets, octuplets, you know, Octomom is a prime example. Rather early in her pregnancy, she was bedbound. I mean, she was literally so large from that many fetuses. And she was very lucky. A lot of times women have significant health issues when they're carrying that many fetuses. It's very taxing on the body. Uh, it takes a lot of nutrients to actually develop a fetus, and there's just additional health concerns associated with that. So sometimes uh, a woman will reduce the number of fetuses just to you know ensure her health. And sometimes the number of fetuses will interfere with each other's growth. So you have too many fetuses in the womb, uh, you may lose all of them. So sometimes you may elect to remove some of the fetuses, which is a very hard decision for women to make, and to increase the viability of the remaining fetuses. Salute, CRU Reality. What's going on with you? So you have Neon Eyes. I have a family member who had a tubal pregnancy that almost killed her. Exactly. A tubal pregnancy will kill you if you don't get medical attention. That's 100% certain. Now, when I go over these facts, just remember, you know, I am in the health profession, but I am not offering medical advice. This is merely for entertainment purposes only. This is my disclaimer. And I don't specialize in obstetrics and gynecology. That's not my area of expertise. I just know it because obviously I went to school for it, but it's not my area of expertise. Um, so when we talk about abortions, the most recent statistics from the CDC says there's about 638,169 abortions for 2015. Obviously, there's going to be more for 2017 and 2018 because as the population rate increases, you know, abortion is going to increase somewhat proportionate to the population. So that's well over 500,000 abortions just for 2015 alone. Okay. And then when we look at the abortions, most of the abortions occur before 13 weeks. And when we look at the abortion rate, just a couple of statistics, 0.3% are less than 15 years of age. 9.8% are between the ages of 15 and 19. 31.1% are between the ages of 20 and 24. And 27.65% between the ages of 25 to 29. 17.7% 30 to 34 years of age, and 10% between 35 to 40, or 35 to 39, excuse me. And then we talk about greater than 40 or equal to at 40 years old or greater, it's going to be about 3.5%. So obviously the bulk of abortions are going to be between the ages of 20 and 24. Okay. That's where the bulk of your abortions are going to be at. And just, 24 years of age and younger. Most of your abortions come from that age group. Okay. So when we talked about Roe versus Wade, again, that was it basically addressed the constitutionality of laws that criminalize or restricted access to abortions. So basically, the court ruled that a right to privacy under due process clause of the 14th Amendment extended to a woman's decision to have an abortion. But that this right must be balanced against the state's interest in regulating abortion. So essentially, this is very similar to what we see with the actual, the marijuana. So marijuana is not necessarily legal from a federal perspective, but from a state perspective, the states have somewhat of autonomy, and they're able to allow marijuana, sale and consumption by the actual population. So similar to abortion, where the state has a general overall guidelines, but the government has their overall guidelines, but the state have individual laws and statutes that specify whether or not abortion is legal. Okay. So when we look at actual abortion, here are some things that are, I guess, thought provoking. Obviously, we went over some of the medical reasons why someone might elect for an abortion. But then there are some, I guess you would consider a moral dilemma. If a woman is a victim, or a child is a victim of rape or incest, non-consensual sex in particular. Imagine being a woman and having the traumatic experience of being raped, the powerlessness of being raped, and then have that exacerbated by the state saying you're powerless to determine whether or not you carried a child of the person who raped you. That's a tough decision. Now there are women out there who carry products of rape to full term and carry and care for and love the children that they've created. But some women, will have a problem with carrying a child whose father raped them. And then when we get into that further, does the father have rights to the child if that child is a product of rape? So those are other questions that are posed when we say, abortion is murder and women shouldn't be allowed to get an abortion. So from that perspective, is really like a very difficult decision. And it's even harder for people to make that decision who are actually in that position. But then you have people who are not in that position who want to make decisions for people who are in that position. So Creole Bomb Cherry, did you not get the actual link? Now you said last time I did this stream with BGS, you weren't a part of the discussion. This is the reason why we're doing the stream now. But you're not on the panel. And I sent you the link. Where are you at? Let me know if you got the link. Oh, no, come on in. Come on in. Come on in. For anyone else that got the link, if I send you the link, that means come in. Yeah, come on in. So, when we discuss further about abortion, the prospects of abortion, and we talk about men's rights in relation to, the process of pregnancy and abortions, the question is then posed: what are the men's rights, if any, with regards to that child? And do those rights extend to the child in utero? So while the child is still within the mother. And if a man has rights to that child, but those rights to the child are different when they're inside the mother, what is the reason why? Now, if the father does not have rights to that child, why is the father legally and financially responsible for a child? That's number one. Let's also look at the criminality aspect. If a woman is pregnant, in most states, you have what's called a modifier. So if there's a crime, say for instance, an assault or maybe even a murder, shooting, stabbing against a pregnant woman, and she loses that child, a lot of times it will be considered capital murder if you kill the mother and a child, an unborn child. But how is it considered murder to an unborn child when it's not considered murder when a woman goes to a clinic and gets an abortion? Either that fetus, embryo, or zygote, depending on the stage of development, if that is to be considered a life at conception, why is it not considered a life with respect to abortion? Good evening, Bomb Cherry. Come on in, Bomb Cherry. Introduce yourself and give your perspective.
Okay, can you hear? Hold on, let me mute the room. Hold on a second.
For some reason, I can't hear you. Is something wrong with your mic? So while she gets things together, that is the actual moral or amoral dilemma. And of course, morality is a very, very relative term, and it's highly individual. There is no general consensus about what morality is. We have a definitions of what morality is, but when we actually try to explain morality, everybody's going to give you a different perspective, especially when we get specific. So, Bomb Chair, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me? You can't hear me? No?
I don't know what's going on with your mic. It's coming in, but I can't hear anything you're saying.
Okay, how about now? No?
Okay. So
Okay, let me go out and come back in.
you can hear her? For some reason, I can't hear her. Hold on for a second. Maybe it's my computer. Oh, I think it is my computer. My volume is turned off.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, my volume was turned off. My bad.
I thought it was my computer. I was like, what's going on?
Okay.
How
Yeah,
you doing?
I'm good. Let me apologize to everybody in the chat. I had my volume on my computer turned down. But yeah, I'm doing great, Bomb Cherry. How are you?
I'm okay. I was waiting for you to, talk about the facts because it sounds like you're giving factual information.
Yeah, I was just giving some statistics. Now, when let me just go back and say that with the statistics, the CDC compiles statistics, and those statistics submissions are actually voluntary.
Right.
So, what does that mean? That means that the actual statistics is not mandated by the United States government that states submit statistics to the CDC.
Right.
Completely voluntary. So each year the CDC requests abortion data from the Central Health Agencies of 52 reporting areas. So the 52 reporting areas, of course, are the 50 states, and then the District of Columbia, Washington D.C., and New York, and New York City. So the New York City and Washington D.C. are separate entities, and this is due in part to their high concentration of populations. And the District of Columbia itself is considered a separate entity because it's considered the capital of the United States. So the reporting areas provide this information voluntarily. So this is part of the reason why the actual data may not necessarily completely reflect the true statistics. So when I say there's 638,169 abortions for 2015, there's probably more. And these are abortions that are performed legally. We're not going to even account the abortions that are performed illegally, which is more than that. So when we talk about legal and illegal abortions together, we're talking about over 1 million abortions every year, well over 1 million abortions every year, probably close to 1.25 million abortions every year. So now that we got that out the way, Bomb Cherry, welcome. Were you able to introduce yourself, Bomb Cherry?
Well, I just want to let everybody know that I'm Bomb Cherry. That's it.
Okay.
Fantastic. Hi, sister.
Hey, can y'all hear me? I'm
We can hear you loud and clear. Introduce yourself.
awesome. I'm Shantastic. How's everybody doing?
Oh, we're doing great. Glad to have you tonight.
Glad to be here.
Okay. So I had a little monologue about abortion. I don't know how much of it you were able to hear. But basically, I was going over some of the statistics associated with abortion, and then some of the issues related to morality, such as incest, women's health, rape, as well as men's rights. So I wanted to get perspective, and we're going to start with you, Bomb Cherry. What do you think about what I've said thus far?
Well, like I said, you was given factual information. I think it is important that you mentioned that the information is voluntary because, we have a group of men who are claiming that Black women are having the most abortions out there. And that's not necessarily true. It might be that the Black women, they're reporting on those women, but there are abortion clinics who don't give up their numbers. Like you said, they're not providing the information.
Correct.
So that's important. But as far as abortion, I think I mentioned this to you. I'm not for abortion, but I am for women's rights, the women's right to choose.
So essentially, what you're saying is that personally, you're not an advocate for an abortion, but you don't want to infringe on the rights of others to make that decision for themselves, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I feel like a woman should have the right to choose whatever she's going to do. And if there's consequences to that, she has to deal with those herself.
So let's go to you, Shantastic. What's your perspective on that?
I'm pro-life. I don't want to force anybody not to have one, and I also don't want to force them to have one, but I am very prolific. Um, you know, I believe in men's rights, and I'm not for abortion, and it's because of my experience with seeing women who have dealt with abortion in the past. I have been an abortion counselor, so I have seen a lot. The statistics are, from my experience, true. Black women make up about 13 or 14% of the population, and over 36% of us are getting abortions at a way higher rate than white women and Latino, Hispanic women.
Okay. Keep going.
I'm against it. I really do feel like it is a form of Black genocide when there are more Black babies being aborted than there are.
Hold on for a second. Hooded one. Why did you retract that message? I saw it. There's nothing wrong with that message. That's a very legitimate question. Put that question back in the chat so I can address it.
Which one?
A hooded one. He put a question in the chat. It was a very, very legitimate question. There was nothing wrong with that question. You just put it back in the chat. I'll address it.
Yeah.
But go ahead, Shantastic. I'm sorry.
Yeah. As I was saying, there are a lot more Black babies being aborted than there are any other race of babies. And most of the abortion clinics, some of the abortion clinics are private, but a big majority of them are not private. And Planned Parenthood is not a private foundation. So they do report to the CDC. And as an abortion counselor, we would keep track of who was going in and out of those clinics to receive abortions, or who was going in and out of the abortion mills to receive those abortions. We would actually take a record of their race, and we would take a record of their license plate and the state that they were coming in from. And this was when I was on the board of Right to Life for the state of Arkansas. And as far as their laws, I think they have a 20-week abortion limitation.
So y'all was taking the license plate?
Yeah, because it's important to have that just in case there were botched abortions. We wanted to be able to report that back to the CDC. So all of the reports are not only coming from the abortion clinics. Most of those reports are coming from either abortion counselors, pregnancy crisis centers, and a lot of the Catholic Church, who formed their own anti-abortion groups. They would report to the CDC as well.
Right, the illegal, the ones who would lie just for their benefit, right?
Well, there's a possibility. I mean, there's always a possibility that people would lie. But when, you're keeping notarized records, of such, because they would not take most of these records if they were not notarized, so you just really rely on people, to tell the truth. And in my position, I was in no position to lie about this, because this was something, and it's still something, that is really important to me, because it affects women who look like me, Black women.
Let me ask you something, Shantastic. Didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
As an abortion counselor, when we look at the actual, and I want y'all to follow me in the chat, because this may give you a little bit of insight. You have what you would consider administrative structure at any facility, but in particular, a facility revolving around healthcare. So oftentimes you have maybe three aspects. You have the medical component, you have a nursing component, and then you have a what you would consider a non-medical component.
Right.
And each individual, I would say, pillar of an institution have a distinct have a distinct leadership structure. And as you go up the echelons, then the actual leadership eventually converges. And then you have maybe like a CEO or an administrator that actually each particular branch reports to. So when we went up your actual chain of command, Shantastic, who did you answer to? And then who did that person answer to? And who did that person answer to?
Now, I was contracted through the Pregnancy Crisis Center.
Uh-huh. So you were not necessarily an employee of Planned Parenthood.
No.
Okay, that's what I want to know, because my concern was that if you were employed with Planned Parenthood, you may be somehow compromised, because obviously you would be entertaining the interests of Planned Parenthood and not the interests of the mother specifically.
That's correct.
Okay. So I would imagine that's the reason why they use contractors instead of individual employees, correct?
Right. Because
Okay.
and in that case, the majority of the time, Planned Parenthood will advocate for abortions.
And that was my primary concern, because I would imagine that a facility whose purpose is to perform abortions would advocate for abortions as well.
Right.
Hmm.
Right. And they do get a lot of money. They're also, because of the fact that the after effects of abortion, you do have a high risk of breast cancer. So Planned Parenthood is in bed with Susan G. Komen, to raise those monies for breast cancer. And of course, they're hitting each other's hands with money, because abortion is a billion-dollar industry.
Mm-hmm.
So they are, in bed with each other when it comes to that. On one hand, they're like, advocating for abortion. And then on the other hand, let's raise money for breast cancer, in which abortions may cause you in the long run.
Well, that will specifically medical abortions now, because remember we have two components. We
Right.
have the actual medical component, which refers to the administration of certain drugs to induce an abortion, as well as the surgical variant. So when we talk about the actual advocacy of abortions, we look at an entity like Planned Parenthood, who obviously would advocate for abortions because that's where their revenue is generated from.
Correct.
This particular facility that you were at, and obviously you can't speak for all facilities, and you can only speak for your tenure while there. Was there any strife between you and the actual employees of Planned Parenthood? What, did they try to limit your ability to talk women out of getting abortions? And did you feel any resentment while you were working there from the other staff members?
Oh yeah. Now we did not work along with the Planned Parenthood. We were actually in a facility right across the street from this particular abortion. This was actually a private abortion clinic. Now this, most of the time Planned Parenthood is smack dead in the middle of the urban community. But this particular facility that I worked across from was it was right outside a suburban area, but it was a private clinic, and a lot of people would come to this clinic due to the privacy, you know. So, but there was a lot of pushback, especially from the employees there, the nurses. A lot of times we would, we were not allowed to stand on their sidewalk and speak to the women. We would have to catch them maybe 5 to 10 feet away from the actual abortion mill and speak to them. And our main purpose was not to talk them against getting the abortion, because I do respect a woman's right to choose what she does with her body, although I am pro-life. So our main goal was to educate them on abortion, what it does to your body during and post-abortion.
Okay. Let me go to the chat real quick. Black in Japan and Black in Japan and CRU Reality. I thought that I sent y'all the link to actually get on the Hangout. If y'all didn't get the link, put your email in the chat and I will email y'all directly. Okay.
Yeah.
So you have to explain this to me, because I was under the impression that you guys were located inside of the actual clinic. You mean to tell me that you're across the street from the clinic?
We were across the street, directly across the street.
So how were you able to? So you had to physically go make contact with these people before they got an abortion?
Right.
Well, okay. So you know, I guess it's different in some states.
It is very different. I know in the state of Memphis.
Well, okay, what state were you in?
At this time, I was in Arkansas. Now,
okay.
a year and a half, I was in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Little Rock, Arkansas. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then a year and a half later, I also I wasn't contracted. This was actually voluntarily, and I partnered with different religious organizations, although I'm not religious, to advocate to be against abortion, rather. And we basically did the same things, although we were not contracted. We were not able to get those license plate numbers because, of course, you have to be within the bounds of the law. So we weren't able to do that, but we did keep a personal record of their race, because it's important to have those numbers.
Okay, so not to cut you off. Okay, so the numbers that your type of organization that you was working for, those are the people who are putting numbers out there that are false, right? Because you are against abortion, and therefore the organizations are willing to lie in order to stop a woman from aborting a child. They are willing, they admit this, they admit to doing whatever they have to do to save a life. And I kind of get it, but then I also know that their numbers are falsified, right?
And what records do you have of the falsified numbers?
License plate number, that's illegal all over the place, right? So
when you're reporting to a legal entity, it's not illegal.
Yes, it's against people's privacy, and that's why they make you stay off their property, because when a woman who have made a choice such as this, have made a decision to walk into a clinic, some things might be weighing on her heart already, and then to be approached by someone who's willing to do whatever it takes to get them to change their minds, even if it's lying to them or putting the fear of God in them and talking about things that these people don't want to talk about. That's the type of organization, I'm not talking about you per se, but that's the type of organization you was working for. So I didn't want anybody to think that you worked for Planned Parenthood, because as soon as you told me that y'all was taking down information, that's against the law. Like even Planned Parenthood, that's why I know their numbers aren't correct. Because the only thing they able to gather is a person's ethnicity, because you can see it, right? The person don't have to give it, but the people are taking it because you can see whether they're black, white, or whatever. And then and their age range, because you have to know If they're below a certain age, they got to require to show ID. Other than that, no other information is required.
It's
And
not
as it should
required
be.
for abortion, but we are reporting to the CDC and we were well within the legal ramifications. Otherwise, we would have been arrested, we would have been sued. The police were called all of the time.
Right, because y'all always are doing some shit that's illegal. I mean, y'all do get sued.
That is your presumption, but you were not there. So you have no idea what
Well,
we were
I'm
doing.
not talking about you per se.
No, not me or even a group. And I mean, unless you're there, you don't know.
But it
Unless you've done
happens.
the research, you
They've
don't
been
know.
sued.
It does happen, and people have been sued, but I've never been in that situation, and I've never seen that situation, and I've done it in 2 different states.
Right.
For I guess what, 4 years, 1.5, and one.
No, I'm not saying that you take part in that. I'm not. Don't get me wrong. I'm not talking about you per se.
There are radical pro-life people. There are radical abortionists. So it's on both spectrums.
How could you be a radical abortionist?
Right. There are people who actually kill people because they want the right to abort, and there have been people who killed people because they don't want them to abort. So if you've done your research, you would know that there have been doctors who have been murdered because they were abortionists.
Right, I know that part, but where are the people killing people for the right to abort? That don't make sense. Most women who, when they want to abort, they abort.
It probably does not make sense to you, but when you've been out there and your life is threatened because you want to save a life, then you would understand at that point.
Well, I understand your life.
So it happens. You're speaking as if it's impossible, but it is very.
I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying it's not nowhere near those people who are radically against abortion, and therefore they will do whatever, like kill a doctor just because he's doing a legal, service of helping women with abortions.
It's probably the same on both spectrums from what I've seen. You're speaking from, I guess, your presumptions or your perspective, but from what I've seen, it can go both ways.
I'm actually not speaking just out there. That's how I knew. As soon as you mentioned the license plate, I already knew like what type of organization it was from already.
Okay.
Right.
And like,
I work in these communities where I go with these young women to these places, and they are being threatened themselves. Like, people have actually threatened a woman who wants to have the abortion. They threaten their lives.
And those would be the radical pro-life people. And by all means, I don't think that's okay at all to threaten someone for wanting to do something with her body. I don't think it's okay. I don't think it's okay to kill a doctor because he performs, or a nurse because she performs abortions.
And how about jumping in front of a woman who's going to their clinic to get an abortion, and you jumping in front of her to give her the stats and tell her how dangerous
From my experience, that never happened. Where I was, we would ask them if they would like to have information about abortion. If they said no, then at that point we would ask them if they would like information on postpartum abortion, which basically gives you therapy or gives you free counseling as to what's going to happen with your body after the abortion, and measures that you can take to stay mentally healthy and physically healthy. It's not, oh, take this, talk to me. You can't go in there. You're going to go to hell. Because that wasn't the case in my situation, or the group, or the contractors that I worked with. Never was. There's no monetary, there was no money in it. So, I mean, there's no money in it there's more money in it for abortionists than it is for people who are pro-life. So there would be no reason, I don't think, for most to lie about the numbers, because if you're sitting there and there's 10 people coming in and 7 out of 10 are Black, then there you have your percentage.
Right, that's at those clinics, right, where they put them inside of the urban communities. But what about the hundreds of thousands of those clinics that are not in the urban communities? So if they have 10 people walking in and all 10 of them are having abortions, they happen to not be black, then what? They're not reporting, so it's as if we don't even know this happening, right?
If they're not reporting, no, we're not going to know it's happening.
Right, and that's all I was saying in the beginning. I was saying that the numbers aren't accurate because, just like he mentioned, it's not even required to report. And therefore, we have a group of people who have decided not to report.
Well, again, we do know that there are entities that do not report information. Planned Parenthood is an entity that reports their statistics to the CDC.
Correct.
There are a lot of private abortion clinics that do not report. This is the reason why people go to private clinics, because they want to maintain privacy. They want to be completely anonymous.
Right.
And sometimes the abortion clinics, these private abortion clinics, will have a separate medical record. So say, for instance, a woman goes to a private abortion clinic, right? And she gets an abortion. It goes on their particular private records. Then this woman goes to a hospital and the doctor does an assessment, takes down some additional, historical data, and the woman doesn't indicate that she's ever been pregnant or had an abortion, right? In her chart, it will be, there's what you call gravida and para. Now, remember, everybody that's in the chat, this is for entertainment purposes only. I am not giving medical advice. I am not a specialist in obstetrics or gynecology. But in the medical record, allegedly, there's going to be an area that says gravida, which is the number of times a woman's been pregnant, and para, the number of times she's delivered, right? So she may go to the hospital and it may say gravida 0, para 0. Now, that may have some bearing on the woman's health if she does get pregnant again, and there may be an issue with RH incompatibility. I don't want to get really deep into that because it's very complicated, but that can affect the viability of her fetus as well.
Right.
So if the doctor doesn't know that information going into the situation, then that could create additional problems. But again, these are private clinics. They don't need to report, and they keep separate records. This is why people go to those clinics. So when we look at the private clinics, right, in a lot of states, these private clinics don't receive the funding that the Planned Parenthood does. So the women, and particularly maybe the significant other, as they go to these clinics, they're going to be primarily responsible for the cost of the abortion. So that's going to limit the demographics able to go to that abortion clinic already because of cost.
Correct.
So when we look at the individuals that are able or that are of means to pay for an abortion in its entirety,
as opposed to the ones who aren't.
Exactly. Now, when we look at the demographics, when we look at statistics related to poverty, all right, we're going to see an overwhelming number of individuals who are below that poverty threshold, who are African American or even Latino to a certain degree. So could this possibly account for the disproportionate numbers expressed in statistics of African American women who seek abortions?
I think so. And then due to the fact that most public assistant, I don't know, what is it, Medicaid, they provide funding for abortions.
I never heard of that before.
They do. In some states, They do.
Oh, some state too. Okay. Yeah, because I think
I don't know if California is one where they provide medical assistant.
Okay,
Well,
I have the statistics on that. I went over the statistics of that in my last stream.
mhm.
Let me see if I can find. Go ahead and talk. But I'm gonna see if I can find the statistics on that because I had that written down.
Yeah,
yeah. So
where
the
they
state
provide
itself
Oh,
was
here we go. I got it right here. I got it right here. Okay, so when I talk about these statistics, I only basically research the statistics for certain states because I mean there's 52 states and I don't want to really get into all that. But so I really kept it to California, Colorado, Florida, New York, Ohio, and Texas, right?
okay.
And so when we talk about funds all or most of medically necessary abortions, that's going to be California and New York. And,
Mhm.
and obviously we're not surprised at that, right? Because
Right.
we know that these are very liberal areas.
Correct.
Washington, Oregon can be thrown in that mix as well. I didn't pull statistics on them, but they do fund all or most of medically necessary abortions. Colorado, Florida, Ohio, and Texas, they don't. They don't. Simple as that. Because and these are the states. Ohio, in particular, I believe will be the first state that will attempt to repeal abortion with the new Supreme Court justice nominee. And then I would say Florida and Texas will follow soon after that. Um, now, with Texas and Ohio and Florida, the funds are limited to life endangerment, rape, or incest. That's it. So if, say, for instance, there's a tubal pregnancy, or there's some type of fibroid or something like that's probably going to bleed and cause a hemorrhage,
Mhm.
something like that, some type of cancer, malignancy of the uterus or of the cervix that's at risk to you know
That
have a
prohibit.
malignancy. Because sometimes those cancers, if you try to deliver a baby, the cancerous cells will then break off and enter the bloodstream, and then you have a malignancy. So
Right.
sometimes the doctor will determine, hey, it's in your best interest if you don't carry this pregnancy to term. That's already a tough decision because once they decide to do a hysterectomy, obviously that woman is not going to be able to get pregnant again.
Right. Yeah.
So they're already facing a dilemma with that. And then it's like, okay, you got cancer, you're pregnant, and we got to get rid of it. It's like a whole lot of stuff at once a woman has to deal with.
Mhm.
So, but so for those cases, we do know that even the really hardline states will allow public funding for an abortion. But continue.
I think Bon was going to say something about the
oh yeah.
funding.
No, yeah, I was just shocked. I've heard where people said there were states that paid, but seemed like every time I talked to someone about it, they had to come up with the money themselves.
Well, I mean, you guys are in the South, so a majority of the states in the South are conservative. So that can account for that. But
Yeah.
Well, I'm up north.
excuse me.
I'm up north
Oh, I
in
thought you were in
Delaware.
Louisiana.
No, I'm from there,
Oh, where are you at now?
Delaware.
Delaware. Oh, okay. Big change. Okay.
Yeah.
So
And
go ahead, Shantastic. I'm sorry.
I know Hooded says that Medicaid pays for abortion where he is. So I was wondering, where is he?
Yeah, where are you at? Oh, Frogbox, what's going on, man? Good to see you. Yeah, Hooded One, where are you at? Oh, okay. So let's rewind a little bit. Now, Hooded One had a question earlier that he retracted, but he put back. So I'm glad he put that question back because he's in Virginia. Hooded One is in Virginia.
Gotcha.
So Hooded One asked about abortion. Okay, here we go. Is aborting a fetus with Down syndrome ethical? So this is where it gets a little tricky.
Yeah. As
Before
far
we get into that, because
Okay.
that's a really, really, really tricky question, and
Mm-hmm.
people are bound to get offended by that. So let me ask you this, Bomb Cherry
Mhm.
and Shantastic.
Uh-huh.
Is a fetus a life?
I believe so. I believe it's viable once the heart starts to beat, and that's what, in between 13 to 18 weeks.
Actually, you can have a heartbeat at 6 weeks.
Cut it out. So yeah, I'm gonna say yes.
Yeah,
And I
you can
say
have
no.
a heartbeat at 6 weeks. Now, it's the heart itself is rudimentary. When we look at the actual development of the fetus, we understand that you have the initial state of ovum that's fertilized by the sperm.
Mm-hmm.
It begins to divide and divide and divide and divide into like a ball. I think it's called a gamete. I had this in school years ago, so please excuse me, everybody in the chat, if I get something that's wrong. I'm just going off the top of my head. But it's called a gamete, and it's basically a ball of undifferentiated cells.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, the cells don't have any distinguishing characteristics. They're just a very simplistic cell: nucleus, cytoplasm, endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi apparatus, mitochondria. Some of the actual components of a cell are present, but the cell itself isn't differentiated. It hasn't begun to produce proteins specific to individual cell types. These cells begin to flatten and they form like a sheet, and these sheets begin to differentiate at that point. And they differentiate into cell types, and they basically differentiate into 3 layers. And the 3 layers will actually begin to form what you would consider the integumentary system, which is the skin. Then you will have the muscle and the bone as another layer, and organs, and then you would have the actual central nervous system, which is the other layer. And then this flat sheet, folds on itself and makes a cylinder, like a tube. And then that tube begins to curve. And this is where you get that actual zygote, that little like tadpole looking thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's where that actual shape comes from, as that cylinder folds and contorts, and then it closes in upon itself. And so then, like, you have issues where like the cylinder doesn't completely close, and you start having issues where you have a cerebral palsy, and you have like a hydrocele or exposed central nervous system. I'm having problems with that. But at any rate, when that cylinder first forms, right, and it has like a cylinder starts to transition into a zygote, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have a very rudimentary heart. So it's basically like just one cylinder, or two cylinder, chamber, 1 or 2 chambers that are actually beating. It's not considered a fully functional heart. I mean, it does distribute blood, but it's not something that would be viable outside of the uterus.
Right.
Even with all the technology you got now, you couldn't. It's not something that could be sustained. So when I say a heartbeat, I want everybody to be sure. When I say a heartbeat, it's that's very, very, I don't know what the word I want to look for, but it's not specific.
Perspective. I feel like if you have a heartbeat, then that's life. I think, to be honest, let's go to when the spinal cord develops. That's just my perspective.
Okay.
And
And that's perfectly fine. I'm not trying to
dissuade
dissuade you. I just want to make sure that people in the chat know, exactly what it is that we're talking about. And again, everybody in the chat, I am not disseminating medical advice. This is for entertainment purposes only. Okay, I want to make that clear. Okay, so go ahead, Shantastic and Bomb Cherry.
Well, for me, I think the fetus is viable or considered a baby once it takes its first breath. Yeah.
Okay, so that's different. So now what you're saying is that the fetus itself is viable once it takes its first breath. So, Bomb Cherry, that's very interesting. So if somebody is pregnant,
Mhm.
and that woman is assaulted. She then miscarries that pregnancy due to the assault. And that's determined by medical professionals, not something that's speculated. We know the only reason why she lost that child is because of the assault that occurred. Now, the person that assaulted her, should he be charged with simple assault and battery, or should he be charged with murder?
Well, now you're talking about legal. So I don't know what the legal.
No, 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 no. I'm talking about from your
Just
perspective.
based on. Oh, my
From your
perspective
perspective.
is oh, that's a hard one. But as far as I'm concerned, the baby is it's not a baby. It's not a person. It's not a living person yet until it's born, or at least where it can survive on its own. Like if the mother passed away, would the baby still survive? Then yes. But other than that, no.
So let me be clear, because I want
Now
to make
remember, I
sure
don't
that
know
we
much
got.
about the law now. I'm not
No, we're
I'm not
not.
a lawyer.
Well,
But
see. Well, this is the thing, right?
mm,
You know, the laws are basically decided upon by people just like you and me.
true, true.
Okay, these laws are not something that was handed down by some celestial being. These are human beings who are actually responsible for drafting these laws and statutes that we abide by here in the United States. So, with that being said, from your opinion, right? We're talking about your specific opinion. That hypothetical scenario that I posed, the person who is responsible for the assault and consequently the fetal demise that occurred in uterus, has that person committed murder?
Um, it's a tough one, but I'm based on what I just said that the baby isn't a boy, isn't a person yet. I would guess no.
So now we have a simple assault and battery, right?
How old?
So
How many months was she?
okay, but see, you just said when the person takes their first breath. So why is it relevant how many months
Remember,
along she is?
because I changed it a little bit. Remember, I said, well, if he without the mother, if it's able to survive without the mother, then yes, then
So
never
so which
change.
is it? Is it the first breath, or is it when the child is able to survive without the mother?
Never it when it's able to survive without the mother.
Okay, so now let's go back. Let's
Okay.
go back. We got to revisit this because now we have some ambiguity, and this is where things get a little bit tricky.
Mhm.
24 weeks gestation. 24 weeks gestation. So we look at 24 weeks, that's about 6 months, right?
Mhm.
So at
Yeah.
6 months, approximately, give or take a couple of weeks, and there's various factors: the woman's health, the whether or not growth retardation has occurred, and generally, what determines a child's viability outside of the womb uh, is usually the lungs. The lungs are take the longest to develop, the lungs,
Mhm.
right? Because there's not only the lungs have to be functional, there has to be a functional amount of surfactant, right?
Right.
And that's a substrate that facilitates the expansion and contraction of the lungs with each inspiration,
There
right?
you
So that's part of the issue. And now with medical technology, we're able to. I think you can actually produce a substitute, some type of synthetic surfactant to assist the premature birth. So, with that being said, at 24 weeks, sometimes even earlier, sometimes it's a little bit later, but that child can survive outside of the womb, even though the mother hasn't delivered yet.
Mhm.
So, at that point, Bomb Cherry, at 24 weeks, give or take, you're saying that the child is viable. And you're saying that therefore that child is considered a life.
Yeah. How many months is that? I'm
About
saying
6 months.
6 months. Yeah.
About 6 months.
6 months. I was about to have my son was premature. So yeah.
Okay, let me go back to the chat because there's a question I don't understand. Okay, so Hooded One says, I personally believe that as soon as cell division begins, it's alive. Okay. Well, remember, cell division begins very, very early. Very extremely early. You know, you're talking about like a couple days
Beginning, right?
to fertilization. You have cell division, and these are undifferentiated cells. But I mean, again, that's your perspective, and I'll respect it. Let me see. Okay, so Shadra Cursor says, if a person is in a coma and not able to fend for themselves, are they not alive? That's a very, very interesting point.
That's a good question. Yeah.
So when we talk about a person in a coma, now we're going to go off on a small tangent real quick. A person that's comatose, right? Say, for instance, this person doesn't have any family, and there's no one advocating for them. Basically, it's at the discretion of the physician. And what normally happens is the physician will get another physician, and two physicians will determine that this person is not viable without the assistive devices, and this person will not make any progress with medical technology, and they will choose to basically terminate all life supportive measures. So that decision will be made by somebody if the person is comatose and unable to make the decision for themselves. Now, in the case of a pregnant woman, the physicians may determine to keep the mother alive through mechanical means until that child is viable outside of the womb. Sometimes they'll do that. That does occur. But if there's no child involved, then yes, sometimes a life is, and it's not even necessarily you're terminating that person's life. You're just removing the life supportive measures, and that person dies naturally. So that's a distinct difference when we're talking about a person who's comatose versus a pregnancy. I just want to make that distinction clear. Now, when we talk more about, let me go back to this chat real quick. I just want to make sure. Brian Bourne, what's going on with you? Head Above Water and Brian Bourne. Let me know if y'all want to get in the hangout. Just send me a message, and I'll give you guys a holler via Hangouts. Okay.
I had a question for you.
Okay, go ahead.
Because since you're in the medical field,
yeah.
While I was pregnant with my first son,
okay,
I almost had him at 5 months. I had to be rushed to the hospital, and they did what they did to make sure he wasn't born too early. But there was a female who came to the hospital, and she was pregnant, but her baby was dead. And she was at 6 months, and she had to 9 months to have that baby, even though the baby was dead. Why is that? Like, how would was the baby still growing?
Okay, so there's various factors that can cause what you would consider a fetal demise. But it's very, very possible. And what happens when that child dies in utero, that's considered stillborn. So sometimes they'll actually go through a conventional delivery. And even though the child has already been determined as clinically dead, they'll deliver that stillborn fetus. Sometimes they'll excise the fetus, via cesarean section or maybe other surgical means, if the woman is not able to expel those uterine contents on her own. And so those are possibilities as well. With the stillborn births, essentially it's a similar concept to a miscarriage. A miscarriage occurs, and a lot of times most of the miscarriages occur in the first trimester, and the woman will a lot of times expel the fetal contents on her own, but the child isn't fully developed, and so they generally don't consider that a stillborn birth. They can just consider that a miscarriage, but actual stillborn birth is usually considered when a child is viable outside of the uterus, and they deliver a developed child, easily recognizable child, but that child has actually died in uterus. And a lot of times they'll have to remove that that fetus if it's unable to be expelled, because the products of conception are unable to be reabsorbed by the body. It's too much for the body to reabsorb. Sometimes with a miscarriage early on in the pregnancy, the body is able to reabsorb. But later on in the pregnancy, that child will begin to decay inside of the body. And that process of decay, the bacteria that aggregate, will begin to release toxins and can endanger the life of the mother. So this is the reason why a developed fetus has to be removed if it can't be expelled naturally.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But she said that she had to go through, I think she had to go 2 months with a dead baby in her, waiting for her body to, I guess, go through labor and push it out.
Yeah, and that's I can't even imagine that. That's something that had to be very, very, very traumatic for that. That you said that was your niece?
No. Just someone I met while I was pregnant with my son at the hospital.
And that's an experience I couldn't even imagine. You know, that's something that would be absolutely traumatic to have to go through. To have a fetus feel its heartbeat. You know, you go to the whole ultrasound process, see the heartbeat, you feel the fetus kicking, then all of a sudden the kicking stops. You stop feeling movement. And then you go to a physician, they say, oh, the child is dead. But you're gonna have to carry it around for a while.
Right.
That's crazy.
So, Super Trace, do you believe that it's ethical to abort a baby with DS, Down syndrome?
Yeah, and that was the question that was posed by Hooded One earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Let's put things in perspective. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many individuals have actually came across someone with Down syndrome or some sort of developmental delay. I had a childhood friend. His name was David, and he was mentally retarded. He didn't have Down syndrome, but he definitely was mentally retarded. He lived in our neighborhood. He was on our street, and you know, we kind of looked after him. You know what I mean? He was sometimes people try to victimize him. We would kind of you know have his back, and nobody wanted to hang out with him, so we let him hang out with us. We'd go different places, go to the store, go to the ice cream truck. It's just different stuff around the neighborhood we would do, you know. Mm-hmm. And you know, he eventually died. Me and my friends and David, we all went to the liquor store in the neighborhood, and he was in the back of the store with us, and then he had grabbed a Jawbreaker. This was back when the Jawbreakers used to be big. Now nowadays you can't get a Jawbreaker that big anymore. They shrunk the size. It was an Everlasting Gobstopper. Okay. Back in the day, the Everlasting Gobstoppers was like they was as big around as a $50. That's how big around they were, and it was a big sphere, and they were extreme choking hazard. But nowadays they've shrunk the size to where it's very difficult to get it lodged in your throat. But David had got one of those Everlasting Gobstoppers, and he took it in his mouth, and I guess he tried to swallow it, or maybe accidentally swallowed it, but it got lodged in his throat, and we watched him die. The owner of the liquor store couldn't do anything about it. I mean, the Gobstopper is so big, you can't get it out the throat. So he died right there in front of us. But before he died, he was always happy. People would make fun of him, pick on him, but he always was happy. It didn't matter. You know, he led, and up until he died, he led a happy life. Mm-hmm. I've met Down syndrome people. Every Down syndrome person I've ever met is always smiling. Every last one of them. So who's to say that because you're Down syndrome or because you're mentally retarded, you wouldn't have a happy life? If you ask a Down syndrome person, do you want to live? I guarantee you 99% of them are going to say yes. So when you abort a fetus, you've taken away that choice. Just like we all want to have the choice of whether we live or die, the life you create at some point when they gain sentience and they have a developed consciousness, they're going to have the will to live. Actually, that will to live occurs very early.
Mm-hmm.
But later on in life, who knows what their potential is? There's people with Down syndrome, people who are mentally retarded, who are living very productive lives. Some, of course, need assistance. The duration of their life, they can't live on their own. But even those people who are not independent are still very happy. So that's the reason why I question the ethical component of aborting a fetus just based on the fact that they have Down syndrome. I think the biggest burden is on the actual family themselves, but the child, that has Down syndrome, I think they enjoy life.
Right. And you mentioned something where some people have abortions because they have too many babies. Like how do you choose which one to abort? Who makes those decisions?
Okay, so when we talk about what you call a multi-gravida pregnancy, like I said before, sometimes the sheer number of fetuses create health concerns for the mother. Sometimes it's the actual number of fetuses create problems and health concerns for the other fetuses themselves. So these are the reasons why a mother would elect to remove fetuses, because she would have problems if she attempted to carry that many fetuses to full term. A lot of times, there are some times where the mother just simply doesn't want to have that many children, and they can elect to have some of the fetuses aborted, in uterus because it's just too much of a burden. So that's a potential concern as well. When we look at the determining factor for which fetuses to abort, a lot of times the physician will evaluate the fetuses as they're developing and say, hey, okay, this fetus is developing a lot slower than the others, or this fetus looks like it's having some type of abnormality, or maybe they have 5 fetuses, they're about to have quintuplets, and the physician looks at the actual ultrasound and determines that these 2 particular fetuses are conjoined, as what used to be called Siamese twins. So let's abort these 2 fetuses because obviously they're going to be conjoined. There's going to be a lot of problems. So those are some of the reasons why a fetus may potentially be. Oh, what's going on, Splash? Those are potential reasons why a fetus could be aborted. Bitcoin Brian, check your email. Okay, so go ahead, Bomb Cherry.
Oh no, you answered my question.
Okay, let's go. Oh, what's going on, Angel Muniz? Splash and Bitcoin Brian are on the check-in. Splash, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to the panel and to the chat?
Yeah, what up? What's up to everybody that's in the live chat right now? This is Splash. I'm calling in from Thailand, from Texas. Yeah, that's all I got for now. And I have a YouTube channel, Head Above Water. I just do live streams and I talk about being Black in Asia and different countries as well.
Respect to you, my brother. Good to have you here.
Welcome.
Okay, Bitcoin Brian. You want to introduce yourself, Bitcoin?
Yeah, what's going on, man? It's Brian. What's going on, brother? Everything's going good, man. I'm sorry I was in a meeting at work. I just got out of a meeting, so I'm kind of late.
Hold on, Bitcoin Brian. We gotta turn your mic up a little bit because we can't hear you.
No, it's some background noise. I'm not sure where it's coming from. Can you hear me?
Your volume is real low. Let me try to turn you up a little bit. Okay. Say that again now.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just coming in, man. I came in a little bit late, but I came in on the conversation. But yeah, man, good points so far, man. I'm eager to give some good information.
Awesome.
Well, why don't you go ahead and give your perspective on what you've heard so far?
Yeah, as starting off in the medical field, when I was right out of high school, I went to pre med. I have a little experience with it, man. But everything you're talking about is true. But I do know when it comes to, like you were speaking about, abortions, C sections, things of that nature. It's a lot of it is about money, man. A lot of it is about money. Doctor gets more money to do a C section than he does to do a natural birth. That's just a proven fact. I've seen it several times. So yeah, you're right when it comes to that, man. Everyone on the panel, respect everybody, man. So I'll get back, let you guys talk, and put myself on mute and listen.
Okay. Okay.
And that is true. And they do get a lot of money for abortions as well. And going back to the Down syndrome subject, I watched a documentary, and a lot of the women who, were speaking about their the first trimester of their pregnancy, once they found out, when they were given an amniocentesis and found out that the baby had Downs, they said that the doctors suggested abortion.
Wow.
And I think the percentage of Downs babies who are unborn, that are, or I think this was in 2015, that were aborted, or were about 91%.
Wow. Wow. And I think there's just a stigma associated with the child born with abnormalities. Down syndrome is an abnormality. It's a chromosomal abnormality, and I don't want to get into the specifics of that, but it is a chromosomal abnormality, and oftentimes a child with Down syndrome is born with some heart defects as well that may affect mortality. So that's something to be concerned about as well. So that potentially can affect the decision of the parents. I won't exactly say that's the compelling factor. I think a lot of the compelling factor is just the social stigma of having a child with abnormality. That's my personal opinion. But again, I am not giving out medical advice. This is strictly for entertainment purposes only. I have to make that disclaimer clear. And as for everyone else on the panel, everyone on the panel is here for entertainment purposes only, and they're not giving out medical advice either. Okay, anybody else want to jump in on that? Anybody else want to jump in on that? Or should I continue?
My husband in the background snoring loud as hell. What can I do to stop this nonsense?
Sometimes the snoring itself may be indicative of some type of airway obstruction. So you may need to get an actual sleep apnea study if he constantly snores.
Use your thumb and your index finger. Hey, but I'm sorry. There's no medical advice. I'm not giving.
I'm gonna put a pillow over his head.
Don't say that on live. Don't say people. Girl, you're gonna get YouTube to close my channel down.
I know there was a case. I don't remember what year this was, but it was in North Carolina when there was. I don't even know the name of the act. It may have been called the Sterilization Act, where they were trading government assistance in exchange for getting the women in your family sterilized. It was in the urban community.
Okay.
Or aborting. I cannot think of the act, but I know there was a lawsuit against the state of North Carolina for doing so.
So I sued Delaware, right? I sued Delaware because in 1996 is when I had my last son. And just to get assistance, you had to, because I was trying to get a Medicaid. Just to get assistance, you had to be on some type of birth control. But see, I wasn't able to be on regular birth control. I I always had issues with birth control. So I ended up having my tubes tied. So they actually had a law that said that I had to do this. I either had to be on I had to have some type of birth control, which only included birth control pills or those things in your arm they had back then, or sterilization. So I ended up getting sterilized. Now, after that, they found out that it was non-constitutional. But they were really doing that in black communities. They were telling women that if you want to get help just to feed your kids and shit, that you had to become sterilized or something.
Okay. Now this right here is very, very startling information. Bomb Cherry, unmute yourself, Bomb Cherry. Unmute yourself, Bomb Cherry, because we got to go into this one more time. I need you to go back over there. I need you to tell people exactly where you were and when this occurred and what exactly occurred. We need specifics.
Okay, just to be here in Delaware, in order for a woman to get assistance, I think it's still that way, but they made some changes to the rules, right?
Okay. When exactly does this occur?
This happened in 96.
96. Okay.
But I believe it started in Virginia. It started in Virginia like in the late 1920s.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah. So in 1996, I was here in Delaware, and I just had my my son. So it was around 96, between 96 and 98. But I ended up getting mine done in 96. Okay. So in order for you to get assistance, help with either food stamps, Medicaid, or any assistance, you had to be on birth control. You had to prove you was on birth control. And at the time, there was only two. There was either where I had to be on actual birth control pills or some type of birth control like that, or I had to become sterilized just to get assistance. Now, since it's changed, because now I think if you could prove that you've been educated on birth what they call it, rubbers, condoms. If you could prove condom usage, and you just had to actually just say, yes, I know about birth control. But then, no, you had to prove you was on it. I remember having to give a notification saying, yes, I'm on birth control. And then when I got taken off birth control because it was making me sick, my only option was to get sterilized.
Yeah, and they did target Black women, people who they considered, I guess, feeble-minded or mentally disabled or handicapped, and inmates.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was a certain demographic of people who they targeted with this particular, law or act or whatever you want to call it.
Let me. Oh, go ahead, Bomb Cherry.
This is when they were playing around with that. Remember, where for a woman to get assistance, they were talking about you're gonna have to now go to work for it. They were just coming up with this and trying to figure out how the laws were gonna work. And I got stabbed in the middle of that shit before they had all the everything, the kinks worked out. Yes, say it again.
It's really a form of eugenics, to be honest, when you're targeting a certain group of people, for that particular reason. It has to be some type of form of eugenics to control.
Hooded One just said that in the chat about a couple minutes ago. He said it's called eugenics.
Okay.
Now let me ask Brian. Bitcoin.
Yeah, man.
What do you think about this? What is tantamount to eugenics that's occurred in certain communities?
Yeah, that's crazy, man. Is that still going on present day, or in any type of form?
A little bit more.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. To this very day, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Population control.
It is
now, Splash. Let me ask you this, Splash.
What up?
do you think it is moral or ethical or whatever you want to call it? Obviously, those ethics and morals is kind of very dependent relative to the person. But do you think that it is ethical to mandate individuals seeking government assistance to exercise restraint or maybe get some type of birth control to ensure that they actually continue to receive benefits?
No, I don't think it's. I think it's very unethical, because when you disenfranchise a group of people, you marginalize them, and you dangle this carrot over their head, saying like, hey, okay, I'll give you some help, but you gotta sterilize yourself, which is like, we've already, on the back end, we've already been trying to sterilize your people for the longest, just not with you, but with your children. We're sending them to, just putting them in special ed and giving them Ritalin. That sterilizes kids as well at a very young age. So it's like, okay, we're just gonna dangle this carrot over your head, and that's very unethical. Because right now, like, we've been hearing in the news for the longest time with organ trafficking, and now a lot of women in the dominant society, they're trying to get they've been getting what's that? They've been getting like their womb, like a womb transplant or their uterus transplant. If their womb is no good, instead of having a surrogate, they'll just get the womb of another woman who's fertile, and then they'll have it surgically put inside of them. And where do you think they're getting those wombs from? They're getting it from our people. So, because we're the most fertile on this planet. So I think it's very unethical.
I didn't know they can do that. So they could take somebody's womb and implant it into another woman?
Yes.
And a lot of times during abortion, they are purposely sterilizing women. So a lot of women are coming out of abortion barren.
Absolutely.
Well, when we look at that actual process of abortion, right, there's different ways you can actually sterilize somebody following an abortion. Let's say, for instance, they do a hysterotomy abortion, which is similar to a cesarean section. You can actually remove the entire uterus through that incision, not just the products of conception. When you remove the entire intact uterus, you can either take the fallopian tubes, you can take the actual the ovaries themselves, but you can actually, generally excise, various components of a pregnancy, of a woman's reproductive system, with the same incision when you're doing a hysterotomy abortion. So it's I won't say it's a simple procedure, but it's like, hey, while you're in there, you can actually do it. It's not like it's a separate procedure. It can be done all at the same time.
That's right.
And so a lot of times the actual abortion processes, what they'll do is they'll give you a ton of paperwork. And Shantasha, you can attest to this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they'll give you a ton of paperwork to sign. And that paperwork you sign, you basically sign over the rights of the actual conception products to the actual facility performing the abortion. And once you actually sign over those rights, they can do whatever. They can do medical research with it. They can take it to a medical student and have it, for dissection. They can, put it in a jar and preserve it for observation. They can even use it for, for study and research involving enhancing the fertility of others.
Right. And enhancing products that we intake in our bodies, such as Pepsi products, which they don't use it anymore. But yeah.
Some people even use it as a souvenir, sadly, because, but
we got to make sure that we say on YouTube, We're not proponents of that. We don't advocate for that, and it is illegal.
Well, nobody's advocating that, but this is well documented that.
I'm just saying for you two because we don't want to get banned. We don't want to get banned. That's what I'm saying.
During the days of slavery, I know, I know for the men, like when they would lynch a man, they would cut off his penis and put it in a jar and have it on display.
Right.
So. And again,
they did that with women as well. They would cut off her vagina and her boobs.
Right. And one thing I want to mention, because I got on late. I know you were talking about abortions earlier. One thing I don't like is I don't like how a lot of Black women in America and around the world as well get a negative stigma about Black women just getting abortions. Other races of women get abortions as well, and I'm not throwing anybody under the bus. I'm just putting this out there in perspective that when I was in Canada and in China as well, there were a lot of women of different races getting multiple abortions. It's just in not so much in China, but in Canada, their culture is a little bit different than in America. It was built on secretism. So a lot of times, like when somebody wants to give information to you in America, you have to pay by way of consultation. Whereas like in Canada, they're just out in the open with their business. And I met a lot of women who were of different races who had multiple abortions. And it was just kind of normal. Nobody didn't really say anything about it. But I just don't like how, women of color in America and worldwide get a bad rap for just, for abortions. And, a lot of times these numbers, sure, they pull up these numbers, they pull up these stats, but, just because somebody's giving you numbers and stats doesn't necessarily mean it's always true. The stat that there's only 13 or 14%, African Americans in America. I really don't believe that. That's just me. That's just my conjecture. So when they give a stat saying, the majority of this many percentage of African American women in America getting abortions, and me personally, I don't believe that. I think it's just propaganda to me.
Right. That's exactly what it is.
Abortions are. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was saying they know that they keep their secrets, and they're able to afford special doctors who will keep their secrets. So when they get these things done, it's not documented anywhere. And so, yeah.
He spoke about China. Did y'all? This is like fresh news. Did y'all hear about the Chinese scientist that was he went missing?
Whoa. No, didn't hear about that.
Yeah, he claims to be the first scientist to do gene editing on babies. So what happened was he modified the DNA of twins to make them resistant to HIV infection.
Now I did hear about the gene editing. I did hear about that, but I didn't know the scientist responsible for that technology.
Yeah, he was in a summit last week and where he spoke about it, and it got big news. Now he's missing.
Well, hey, guess what? I'm not surprised. Either somebody wants to suppress that technology, or somebody wants to take advantage of it for themselves.
There you go.
I mean, just that simple.
Either one, and I'm thinking suppression because, of course, they do have the patent on AIDS, and there's money to be made through HIV and AIDS. So, I'm not surprised.
Now let me go back to the chat, and first and foremost, let me thank everyone in the live chat for joining this spirited discussion. Let me first say that this is for entertainment purposes only, and we are not disseminating medical advice. Let me say to Bentley, he states, no one is required to take assistance. I feel if you're taking money from someone, they are within their right to make their own requirements. So he's referring to the actual stipulations for abortion that are imposed on certain demographics with relation to receiving public assistance. Again, thank you, Bentley 3805, for your contribution. We do appreciate your opinion. It's valued here, and you're very much so entitled to your opinion. Anyways, what you call it said CIA got him. Perhaps, we don't know. or it could be some other intelligence agency. There's many intelligence agencies in the world. Every country has their own respective intelligence agency. So it could have been from anyone. While you guys are in here in the live chat, please hit the thumbs up button, hit the like button if you haven't done so already on your way in or on your way out. And make sure that you subscribe to my channel so that way you guys can catch all of my live streams. Bitcoin is going to be starting up with his own channel as well. Bitcoin, if you want to put your link in the chat so people can subscribe preliminarily. Bomb Cherry has a channel as well. Bomb Cherry, if you want to put your channel in a link for your channel in the chat, please do so. Head Above Water, who does frequent live streams. He gives an interesting perspective about living in Asia. If you want to subscribe to his channel and catch his live streams, please do so.
And I'm gonna start uploading videos back up now. So I was gonna do so yesterday, but somebody called me. It was a very important call, so I had to stop. But the new video I'm gonna post up what really goes down with Instagram models in Dubai. You know,
I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah.
Talking about them getting pooped on and stuff like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm gonna talk about that.
So I wanted to say something to Bentley. What he said about them putting stipulations on you needing assistance, right? Because I could swear I served this country and I paid my taxes. And when there was a time when I needed assistance, they shouldn't have been able to tell me that I had to become infertile. And since I wasn't on assistance very long, that means for the 3 months, maybe even 4 months, I'm not sure, 3-4 months that I needed assistance, I ended up making a life-changing decision. Now, suppose I wanted more children. See, I wasn't able to have any more children. At the time, my choices were to get on assistance so I can make sure that I can have my baby and my baby can get, the things that he needed, or not get assistance at all and try to figure it out. So when people try to tell you that you need to, when you need help, you just have to do whatever they tell you to do, I don't think you're looking at everything. I bet you if they told you you would have to get circumcised if you're not already, or if they told you that you would have to get your, what they call it, what you men get when you can't have kids?
A vasectomy?
They told you men, in order for you to get assistance, or for your children to get assistance, you had to get a vasectomy. I bet you would think differently about that situation.
Well, in all honesty, men don't have birth control options to the extent that women have. I do hear your point, and I'm not contesting it, and I do see your issue with that. I think that there's other ways to approach that issue. I think that basically what you do is you put stipulations on the actual dissemination of funds. So you say, okay, this is the number of children you have. This is the amount of funds that will be dispersed by the government to assist you. If you decide to have more children, this amount of money being dispersed will not change. So that way, the burden of responsibility is placed on the prospective mother to say, hey, okay, this is the amount of money I have to work with. If I have more children, I will just merely divide the amount of money I have amongst the remaining children. So that will make the person think twice about having children, as opposed to saying, hey, you could be potentially sterilized. And if you do decide to have more children in the future, you won't have that option anymore. So that's just my personal opinion. I don't think that somebody should have to take birth control or have to take, have to be sterilized because there's other ways. You just basically say, okay, this is the amount of money you get, and it's not going to change no matter how many children you have.
Right, I think they did that, but I wasn't even going for money, right? I never qualified for money. It was medical. That's what I applied for. What is it called? Medicaid?
Medicaid, okay.
Yeah, that's what it was called. Yeah, Medicaid. At the time. And that was me getting, I was waiting for my military
because I'm a disabled vet. I was waiting for all that paperwork to get done, but I had to have my baby. See,
and you know, and I think that's not a position you should have ever been put in. You know, that's just my personal opinion. I think that, you know, that shouldn't affect your ability. That they shouldn't even pose that question to you. It should have been, okay, hey, we're going to go ahead and do this and get it done. You know, and I'm speaking more of people who are getting public assistance on a routine basis, like maybe they're getting assistance with housing, or they're getting some type of a SNAP card, and saying, hey, this is the amount of money that you're going to be allotted on a monthly basis. It's not going to change no matter how many children you have. That's the solution to that.
right.
But at any rate, moving forward, head above water, you got any more input on that in response to Bentley?
You talking about that scientist that went missing or what?
No, I'm talking about the comment. Well, okay, we can move on if you want to move on.
Oh no, you was talking about when he said the government assistance comment that he made.
Yeah, but basically he's saying that the government should retain the right to mandate certain stipulations such as birth control or sterilization in order for an individual to continue to receive benefits.
I believe, I agree with what he's saying partially because everyone does have a choice, but I mean, morally that's unethical, so I mean, when you're taking somebody else's money, they're going to want you to do what they want you to do with their money, their money, their rules. And do I think it's unethical? Yes, but I mean,
is it our money or is it their money?
Very good point. Very good point, Bomb Cherry. Very good point.
Well, I mean, I would say it's both, but at the same time, like, do they really have to give us anything? No, because I mean, people, the government in different countries or whatever, they've screwed over people for a very long time, and some people don't blink, they don't bat an eye. So
this is very true. You go to some of those other countries, don't expect the government to help you with anything. It's like you on your own.
They're not paying into it neither, right? They're not paying into it, and we do pay into it.
Now, some of these other countries, they do collect some sort of taxes, but the taxes are generally reserved for certain public programs like defense, the actual police and fire department, and infrastructure. But as far as assisting people with their actual living wages and nutrition, no, they won't. The government won't assist you on that end. That's like the individual responsibility of the citizens.
Wow,
and that extends to people who are handicapped.
I know a lot of people are saying that it's unethical to do that, but a lot of people also say that America is basically a corporation, and wouldn't a corporation have their own code of ethics that, quote unquote employees or
well, we all know and understand that America, the United States of America, is a corporation, although the government will deny that and say that they're a country and blah blah blah, this, that, and the third. But we do know it's a corporation, and is run accordingly. Is run as a business.
Mm-hmm.
And so if there's ways to get somebody to pay out of their pocket for a particular service as opposed to dipping into the pot,
they're going to do.
Sam. Yeah, they definitely gonna try to get you to pay out of pocket if they can.
Yeah, I don't think what the government does is all bad. They definitely helped out a lot of people. I don't know everybody's situation. They definitely helped out a lot of people. So, I just wanted to say that.
Okay.
I'm for the government. I'm not against, the government at all.
Yeah, I'm for the government also because I've seen a lot of people get help. So
yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, when you compare it to other countries, it's like I'm definitely for the American government because, I mean, you come out here to Thailand, China, Japan. There's a lot of people, they don't get no assistance. You know, it's no nothing. So
They don't provide nothing for their elderly or low income or.
no, like I need to repost that video. I still have it, but I have it on private. But I did a whole video talking about Korea, and I think they said that it's 55 or 60% of their elderly are homeless over there. They don't give any assistance over there to the elderly, to the geriatrics. And you know, normally in Asian culture, what people do is like when the parents get older, the parents end up living with the children so they can monitor and take care of the grandchildren. So I'm like, where are all these people's children that are? Like, why aren't they living with their children? Because I've been to Korea like 4 or 5 times, and I saw elderly people everywhere just hanging out. And I'm like, are these people homeless? Are they just getting fresh air, exercise? Are they bored? And when I did my research, they're like, no, over half of these people are homeless. And they get no assistance. If a woman has a child and the father runs off, they get no assistance. And even as a foreigner in places like Japan, in a country like Japan, if a foreigner has a child with the native of a person in Japan and they go to court and that other parent says, hey, you know what? I don't want this person seeing my child ever. The government will grant them their wish and they will ban you from ever getting in contact with that child until they're 18.
Oh man, that's crazy.
Whereas like America, you can get somebody can get full custody, but you have visitation rights in America. You have no visitation rights in Japan.
Yeah, different countries have different rules, man. It's crazy.
Make sure you all post in the chat so I can subscribe. If y'all don't mind women subscribing, I know some men don't like women subscribing, but
no, I don't mind. Like I want more women to subscribe. I posted up my link earlier because I like to get the perspective of women and their opinions. I know some people, they think, some of the videos that I posted in the past, I was talking down on women over here, and I wasn't. It was just I was showing really what women go through living abroad in Asia, so I talked about that. But a lot of times people, they complain about the American government, but I tell them, like, you got to travel. When you travel, you learn to appreciate the American government even more, because there's people over here that in different countries that get nothing.
Facts.
And most people who are in the military or have traveled, they recognize that a lot more than people who have not been out of the country.
Yep.
Right. And then, a lot of times, I hear people in America saying, well, I'm going to go to Canada then. I'm sick and tired of this place. I'm going to Canada. I'm like, I've seen more Black millionaires in America than any other country. I mean, it doesn't even have to be, just in the entertainment field as far as like music. I mean, actors, that's too easy. We could talk about some of our inventors, our astronauts, our doctors, our lawyers, our judges that we see locally within the community that are Black, that are doing well for themselves. In Canada, you don't see none of that at all.
Right.
You don't see none of that. I can't name a Black doctor, a Black lawyer. When I would travel in different neighborhoods and I would go in some of these suburbs, I'm like, well, are there any Black people that are doing well over here? I don't see it. I just don't see it in Canada. So, and the thing is, when people get that money, like, they have a choice as to what they can do with that money. People, they can get that money and flip it for themselves and empower themselves if they want to, but in Canada, they don't have that option. I've never seen it. I've never seen it.
Okay.
Usually in other countries, the darker skin complexion people, all of them, I won't say all of them, but the majority of them are living in squalor. Like me being from Texas and in the South, I've seen dozens of Black suburbs, just nice upscale neighborhoods with nothing but Black people living in them. I mean, I've never seen that anywhere else.
That's an interesting point. That's a very, very interesting point. You know, and I you know, I've been other places too. Most of the places that I've been to, you know, I've been to Mexico, obviously, but I haven't been to like a predominantly African descent country. I haven't been to anything else outside of the United States. So I haven't been to like Africa or some of the places in South America to evaluate what the standard of living is for African Americans in those particular countries. I can only go by what I've heard and what I've particularly seen, but nothing that I've actually experienced personally. But I'm going to shift gears just a little bit here, and we're going to kind of wrap things up after this last subject because I don't want to keep the stream going on too long. I just want to kind of hit the highlights, and then if we need to revisit this subject later on, then we'll do so. So the last thing I want to talk about is men's rights. When we talk about abortion, obviously, that is the decision that has to be at least finalized by the mother, if not completely decided upon by the mother. It's the mother that actually goes to an actual clinic or to a medical facility and gets the abortion done. They're not actually doing any type of surgical procedure on the man. They're not having the man take any medications. This is something that is done to the woman. The woman has to take the medications necessary for abortion. It's the woman who has to actually have the surgical procedure if necessary. It's the woman who actually has to go through an induction of labor to expel those intrauterine contents. So when we take that into consideration, you have to ask yourself, okay, what are the man's rights in relation to that unborn child? First and foremost, let's ask ourselves, does the man have rights to a child once it's born? And very briefly, can you guys respond to that going down the line? Start with Bomb Cherry.
Yes.
Okay. Bitcoin, what you think?
I think a man should. Does he? Not as much as I would like. Me having some experience in that, but yes, I think a man should have rights, but his rights are limited in certain circumstances. Present day, yes, in my opinion.
Okay, I can respect that. Fantastic. What do you think?
I think he should. I absolutely think a man should have rights.
Okay. Splash, what do you think?
I agree with Brian. I think a man should have rights. Oftentimes in the media, you hear horror stories of, men getting dragged through the ringer, and particularly brothers, paying record number of child support with that amount. I think the record is Eddie Murphy. But I think now the record is
Blake Griffin,
the guy who used to play for the Clippers. Blake Griffith. He's paying $250,000 a month. I think that's insane. Of course, like with your status, should he be paying a little bit more than just the bare necessities? Yes, I think you should definitely put the mother in a nice house because you want to protect the child. Your child does have status because of you. They're going to recognize your child, and you could put your child in harm's way if you just have them going to, just a regular school. So, I definitely agree with, somebody paying a little bit more than the bare necessities, but not $250,000 a month. I think that's insane. But
yeah, that is excessive.
Right.
It's not excessive if it's just a third of his income. Right? He's a millionaire, so his child's a millionaire.
No, his child doesn't dribble the ball,
Well, you know what? That's a whole nother subject. And matter of fact, we're gonna have to put that on the docket.
Yes.
We're definitely gonna have to have a conversation about that. Maybe even later this week. I'm not sure when we'll be able to reconvene on that particular subject, but we're definitely going to talk about that and go in depth. But as far as like the men's rights, from my perspective, I think that this is very ambiguous because I think that, in my personal opinion, and people may disagree with me, on this. I think that more of the right should lie with the mother because she's the one that actually gives birth to the child and brings the child into fruition. The father does obviously have a contribution to that child. But I think that it should be the mother that retains rights to that child. Now, my perspective as a man, I think a man should really have a lot of discretion about who he chooses to impregnate, because I think that as a man, I would want to be in my child's life 100%. I think it's very important that a child has that balance of both the mother and the father. And as far as like, resources for the child, I think that a man should provide resources for the child. Should it be legally mandated? I don't know about that, because everybody determines how much, money they want to give to that child. But that's like I said, we'll revisit that subject later. As far as the man's rights to the child, I think that more of the right should lie with the mother. I think that when you try to split the rights 50-50, then the question becomes, okay, if we're in the hospital and I want to walk outside with that child and drive across country to Topeka, Kansas, would I be able to do it, or should I be able to do it? The hospital's not going to let you. You can say you're the father all you want to. You're not going to just walk out of that hospital with that child and the mother didn't authorize it. It's just not going to happen. So with that being said, when we talk about a man's rights to the child, we have to really evaluate that concept very carefully, because if a man is entitled to that child just as much as the mother is, then he should be able to walk out of that hospital with that child. So it is very hard to give 50-50 responsibilities, because again, we're talking about 50-50. This is the reason why the Congress has an odd number. Because when you have an even number, then you split down the middle, nothing gets done. But see, when it's an odd number, then there's always going to be a majority, even if it's a majority. So we have to have somebody, that takes ownership of the situation, because you run into situations like, okay, well, if the child is 50-50 custody, well, who does the child live with? Who decides what hospital the child goes to? Who's ultimately responsible for medical decisions regarding that child? Because there's situations where a decision has to be made.
But
she's not, my thing is, if she's not splitting the rights, then he shouldn't be splitting his money.
Okay. I definitely respect that. Splash, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, I want to chime in on something, because I want to play the devil's advocate just a little bit, just on both sides. Because I do come from I do talk about international games. So I think in America should improve more on men's rights. And I think overseas, playing the devil's advocate, other countries should focus on women's rights as well, because, child support, do I think that's a good program that's going on in America? Absolutely. But I mean, does it need to be tweaked? Sure. Yes. I think they do need to focus on men's rights in America, but in other countries, all these other countries out here, man, like there are no women's rights at all. So when a woman has a child by a man, she gets nothing, especially out here. I've seen that when I was traveling in Asia, because like I said before, Black people, we get that stigma like, oh, we grew up with no fathers, just fatherless homes. And I see fatherless homes all around this country in Thailand, everywhere. There's a lot of single mothers out here. There's a lot of single mothers in Canada as well. But see, the difference between Canada and here, in America and here, is that women, when they have a child when they have a child with a man and he runs off, she doesn't get anything. So not only is she stuck with that child, raising the child by herself, she's stuck with that negativity within the community, because they have really high standards over here. When a woman's a single mother overseas in Asia, like the community just deems her as no good. Like this is like you should have made better choices. So 9 times out of 10, she'll never remarry or be able to get into a relationship with somebody from her community ever again if she's a single mother out here in Asia. It's very high standards. And now it's like, okay, I have this negative stigma, and I'm raising a child by myself with no assistance and no help. So I think, just me talking about the international game in America, I think they should focus more on men's rights, and within other countries, they should focus on women's rights as well.
Very, very good input. Thank you, Splash.
Mm-hmm.
Brian?
Yeah, everybody's making some good points. Like I said, a lot of times a lot of the issues are social issues. A lot of issues are personal issues. Yes, I do think that when you're talking about two sane people and people in their right mind, yes, of course the mother should have rights when it comes to being able to leave the hospital, and the father just say, look, it's mine, I'm taking it wherever I want to take it, and and that's it. You come find me. Yeah, of course. But there's so many other issues out there, socially. For instance, if they're not married and the mother has remarried or has someone else, and they have a situation where they want to keep the baby from the father, they can move out of. They can want to move out of state, and they want to do things of that nature. Now the father has to go and put himself on child support. Like me personally, I did not want to be on child support. Myself and my son's mother, we talked about it. We had a conversation about it. My son's 10 now. I've never been on child support, but I've also given her $700 a month since he was 2 years old. Every month, never late, and sometimes more when she asks for more. So, it's just a give and take. Would the court probably make me pay less than that? Possibly. But I don't want them people in my business like that. I'd rather pay and take care of my son in a different situation, But everybody's situation is different. But when it comes to the system, I have many friends and family members that are in the system, and they have some bad situations when it comes to that, because a lot of it is socially. Prime example, and I don't want to take too much of the time. I have a friend of mine. She was supposed to get married to her new husband. She has a baby by another person, and she was supposed to get married. Well, they have visitation, so every other weekend the baby goes with the father. Well, had a conversation with the father. Everything was fine. The wedding just happened to be on the day of the wedding. I mean, the wedding just happened to be on the day the father was supposed to, on the weekend. The father was supposed to get the child. Well, everything was fine. Had a conversation with the father. Wedding day comes. They got the tuxedo for the little baby, everything. Wedding day comes, and boom, the father said, "Nah, I'm good. He's with me. I don't want. Nah, he's good." And the baby wasn't allowed to be in the wedding. This little kid was maybe 3 years old. So and now it's just a battle. But of course, it was court mandated. So of course, the father could have done. It was his right. It was his weekend. But it was just a social issue, and spite and things of nature. So a lot of these issues are social issues as well,
That's very interesting. What are you going to say, Shantastic?
Social issues made into legal issues.
Well, I mean, it's really hard to separate the two, Shantastic. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So we're going to go to Bomb Cherry with this particular issue. Okay. Now, Bomb Cherry, I'm going to ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now that people have, pretty much divulged their perspective on, men's rights. Okay. So, and you said you're a proponent of a woman's right to choose up until viability outside of the uterus. Now, does the man have a right to choose up until viability outside of the uterus as well, considering it's his child? What say you, Bomb Cherry?
Oh no, the man doesn't have any rights his
I
rights.
knew you were gonna say it.
Yeah, because he doesn't. I mean, okay, so he has the right to offer his gift of a seed, right? His seed. Once he give her that gift, then he has no rights up until that baby is born. Now, as soon as that baby is born, he has equal rights to the child. The same exact rights she has to the child, he has to the child. But while she is pregnant, he has no say because everything evolves around her body. Okay, so it's not that I don't want to give him rights. It's the fact that it is all about her body.
And Bentley, hold on, Bentley in the chat. Go ahead and let me know what you think about that too in the chat, because Bentley says the father is just as much of a parent as the mother, and that was a response to my comments about me feeling like the mother is more entitled to the child than the father is. That was my personal opinion. Bentley 3805 doesn't agree with that. Thank you, Bentley 3805, for your input. Much appreciated, much respected. So Bomb Cherry is standing by her particular opinion that the man doesn't have rights up until the point of viability outside the uterus. The man only has rights once that child is actually delivered. Brian, what say you?
Me
Hold
personally,
on. Go ahead, Bomb Cherry.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak more on him having his rights. So I do know that, and I'm not sure if it's just in Delaware or everywhere, but men, you have equal rights to your children, just like a woman do. You just have to take your time and go to court. When you have a court date, you need to show up, because if you don't, that's when you get dragged. Okay, so my son has a girlfriend who has a baby by another guy, and he didn't want to pay child support, so he have equal rights to his daughter. So he get to see that baby. What is it? 3.3 how do they split up 7 days? However they do it, they actually do it that way. You don't have to give her a dime. He has that child 3 days out of the week. She has the child 3 days out of the week. You don't have to pay a dime, and he's in his child's life. It's a lot of paperwork. You got to go through the courts, and and get your days and abide by the rules. But it could happen, and your children deserve to have you in their lives. That's all I'm saying about that.
Bitcoin.
yeah. Just to roll back what you was talking about this as far as the mother having the rights. In my personal opinion, I would say yes. The mother should have is when she's carrying that baby, you know, she has she has the rights. The baby is in her womb. That's just my personal opinion. I think the mother, yes, she does have rights. Um, but it gets kind of tricky because if if that's his seed, if that's, well, I use myself an example. If that's my seed and she wants to abort the baby and I don't want her to, she can do whatever she wants with her body. I mean, what I'm gonna do, sue her? I mean, come on. I mean, but I don't think it's right. But at the same time, if I was man enough to give her that seed, I got to be man enough to deal with her decision while the baby is in her womb. Now, like you said, after conception, after the baby's born, now we got a different situation, But I will say that once the baby's, if she's carrying that baby, then she has the right to do what she wants. It's her body.
Sue her ass. If you want her to have that baby, I'll sue her ass and see how it work out.
Fantastic.
I honestly think it would work out better if the two were married. It would be easier because I'm kind of with Bomb on that. It is her body. And if they're unmarried, then what can he say?
Okay,
You could
so what if they are married? Then what?
If you are married, I think he should have a right and a say.
But
Because
what
if
are the consequences? What are the consequences, though?
There we go.
yeah, that's a tough.
You know what you gonna do? You're gonna put in baby jail, in baby prison.
He gonna sue his wife. He gonna sue his wife.
That's an automatic divorce right there. So you know what I'm saying? You lose.
Sue her ass.
They
Okay.
won't be married no more then, so they'll be unmarried. So they'll be
Here
divorced.
goes an even trickier one. It may not be trickier depending on what your viewpoint is. Because in some states, it's allowed for a minor child to get an abortion without her parents' consent.
Mm-hmm.
In some states, it requires a parental consent, but that can be circumvented with a court order that the child can obtain on her own.
Wow.
Yeah, wow is right, Brian. I don't know if you're aware of this, but yes, this is the reason why it's very important. This is a whole nother subject. It's very important to know the laws and statutes in your particular state and province.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important, and I think I'm an advocate of public school systems being required to educate all students on law. I don't understand why that's not part of the curriculum. How can you hold somebody accountable for laws that you haven't made them aware of?
Exactly.
It doesn't make any sense to me. But anyways,
well, it's because they bank on us being ignorant of the law.
Obviously, that's what's going on. But what do you think? Okay, fantastic. What do you think about a minor child being able to seek out an abortion without their parent or guardian?
I don't agree with that at all, because that is a way to hide pregnancies begotten through pedophilia and molestation. So, I mean, I don't agree with that.
Okay.
Even from a medical standpoint, I don't agree with it. I mean, that is a major situation. I mean, people have died from abortions and situations. You gotta have a minor, and based on the age that that minor might have some issues. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you never know. You some parental consent or control needs to be implemented in that situation. But that's me.
Well, because even when you're talking about a strictly medical abortion, non-surgical, when you're taking misoprostol, mifepristone, or methotrexate, one of those, any combination of those particular what you would consider abortion drugs, even though methotrexate is more of a cancer drug, but it has implications for an abortion. When you're talking about those particular drugs and utilizing them for an abortion, there are complications that can occur. Sometimes the pregnancy isn't completely aborted, and that pregnancy can be brought to full term with abnormalities, or the actual products of conception can be retained after the fetus is aborted and an infection risk ensues. Or there could be an induction of labor, placental contents separate from the lining of the uterus and cause hemorrhage or bleeding. And this is something that maybe a minor may not have the mental capacity, or maybe they don't have the actual judgment to seek out medical attention, or maybe they're just trying to hide it.
Exactly.
And they actually hemorrhage to death, and maybe they don't die. A lot of people hemorrhage and then they're found, but because their organs and their brain have been deprived of oxygen and nutrients for so long, they have damage that occurs. Maybe they're cognitively impaired. Maybe they're a vegetable now, or comatose. Maybe they have some type of liver or kidney. Usually the kidney goes before the liver. They have some type of kidney damage. Now they got dialysis by the time they're 25, 30 years old. All kinds of stuff can happen because the parents weren't involved in that process.
Right.
Or maybe the parents want to provide counseling and say, hey, I don't approve of you getting an abortion. This is the reasons why. Because maybe that's not a conversation they've had because they didn't feel it was necessary. And they haven't divulged their particular viewpoints to their child. What do you think, Bomb Cherry? And then we're going to go back to Shantasca again.
Okay, well, I'm okay with the law where the kid can go and get an abortion without the parents' consent. Because we have a lot of parents out here who aren't even taking care of their children. So I guess it depends on what type of relationship you have with your children. See, I wouldn't be concerned with that happening in my household because I know my children will be able to come and have a conversation with me. But we got to think about those kids who don't have that. So think of a young girl. Hey, dear, turn around. You're making too much noise. Hello?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. So, yeah, there are some young ladies, who I dealt with in the communities who just didn't have that support from their mothers. They didn't have fathers in their lives at all. They don't have grandparents, like some of us had at least our grandparents. And so they have decisions they have to make. Okay.
Now,
and,
Bentley 3805, before we go to Shantastic, Bentley 3805 says teenagers can't sign for a cell phone without a parent. So why is it okay for them to have an abortion? I'm not sure about that. I don't have any kids. So I don't know anything about whether or not children can sign for a cell phone, but it does make sense that it is a legal contract. And when we talk about an actual medical procedure, there's documentation that has to be signed. And so I think Bentley makes a great point when he says, why should children be authorized to make those type of decisions? Because if somebody's a child, we classify them as a child for a particular reason, because they don't have the judgment to make certain decisions on their own. Right. And so we want them to rely on their parent or guardian to provide leadership and direction when making these difficult decisions.
But that's what the court's for, right? That's why by the time we go to the court, someone is actually going to have that child's, they're going to look at things and make a decision for them.
Well, see, you're talking about the situation in which, I forget what the exact term is, but there's a specific term for this when a child is able to go to the court for that particular abortion procedure, and they like by proxy, facilitate the abortion documentation to be signed. But I think what Bentley is referring to is when a child, because in some states, there doesn't need to be any court proceeding to allow for that abortion. A child could just go to an abortion clinic on their own and say, hey, I want to get an abortion. And depending on the state, that procedure might be performed without that parent or guardian authorizing that procedure. What say you, Shantastic?
I don't agree with that at all. It puts the child, a lot of people don't think that there are high risk for, with abortion, but there is, so it puts the child's life and health in danger. I don't think they are sound enough or mature enough to make that decision without a guardian or a parent. I just don't.
Well, very, 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 very good points there.
Well, I have a question. Suppose they have an adult with them who just isn't their parent or their guardian. Just because a child walks, when they say they don't have a parent or a guardian, does not mean they don't have a person who's an adult who's looking out for them.
Okay, so let me pose this to you, Bomb Cherry. Now, 9 times out of 10, if it's a minor that's pregnant, it was an adult that impregnated her. So there you have your adult. You're going to have a guy who says, you know what? We got to get this damn abortion, because if anybody finds out I got you pregnant, I'm going to jail. So obviously you're going to have somebody, an adult in that child's life, that's going to be an advocate for her getting an abortion. Now, when you talk about an adult accompanying that child, how are we to discern if that adult has the best interest of the child in heart, or his or her own best interest in heart? Because maybe even it could be the girlfriend, because there's cases of that I see on the news all the time. I won't say all the time, but I see it frequently enough to where I've noticed that there are situations where you'll have a man who's molesting a child, and he has not only the consent, but he has somewhat of participation from his significant other who's an adult. So you have a man and a woman co-conspirators in the molestation of a child.
Right.
And so then you'll have a woman who will say, hey, we better get an abortion. And she'd be glad to accompany that child if need be to ensure that the abortion takes place.
Right. But what stops that from happening anyway, right? These might be her family members who are participating in that anyway.
Well, I mean, there's always family members that the actual parents may not necessarily agree with. So if I got somebody in my family that, yeah, they're my family, we'll go visit them, but I don't visit them. I don't let my children visit them without me being there, because I don't, I got to keep them at arm's length. I got to feed them with a long handled spoon. So you may have a family member who's actually related. They may even have the same last name as your children, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I want to give them authorization to make those decisions. I don't want my family making decisions if I don't have any children. But if I have children, I don't want my family arbitrarily making decisions on my behalf if I'm available to make those decisions myself. Now, if I'm out of the country or something like that, and I say, hey, Mom, can you take care of this for me? Dad, can you take care of this for me? That's a different story. But if I'm able to be reached, why are you making decisions for the sake of my children without my consent? Mm-hmm. Not no, but hell no. And I don't want my children making that decision either. There's nowhere in the world I want my daughter, if I have a daughter, to be able to go to a birth control clinic and get an abortion without my consent. Absolutely not. Because I understand that there's other implications when you talk about an abortion. Sometimes there's follow-up that's necessary, and the child's not necessarily going to get those follow-up because maybe they don't think it's that important, or maybe they're just scared and they just want to hide it. So this is the reason why I want to be involved in that process. Just like it's almost like saying, some people don't want their children to get immunizations. That's a whole nother subject. But again, decision, or, and you start talking about abortion, which is an elective procedure. Here we go. Now we're opening up Pandora's box. Right. We're going down the rabbit hole when we start talking about authorizing children to get elective procedures.
Right.
Because that includes breast implants. That includes fat transfer. They do blood implants too, hard silicone blood implants that are actually authorized by the FDA. So you can talk about getting a child who's 12 years old getting a butt implant and breast implants. Now she looks like an adult.
And at the end of the day, it's like this. You're the parent. When you have a minor, you are responsible for that minor. You're responsible.
Exactly.
So how they gonna cherry pick certain situations? So okay, well if they go get this done, then you're not responsible. But if they go out there and shoot somebody or be negligent, and take your car and run and kill somebody, now you're responsible. Now it's your fault.
So let me explain what the situation with me. Okay, so I took my niece to get an abortion twice. She was underage. Her parents knew about it. They just didn't want to take her, right? They didn't want nobody in the church to see her. Now they gave her the money. They gave her permission, but they didn't have to sign anything because I think she was 16 at the time, the first one, and probably 16 the second one also. It happened back to back. But so just because the kids are able to go and they don't need signatures does not mean that the parents don't know about it.
Well,
parents just.
That's a very good point, Bomb Cherry. But look at your situation. The parents in that situation knew about it, and they entrusted in you that responsibility. Now, I think that in order to be certain, there should have been a document necessary for the parents to sign, even if they're not signing it in person. There should be a process where a parent can, somehow authorize their child to get an abortion if that's their choice. And if we're actually saying that abortion should be legal, that parent should have to sign. I mean, it's like Bitcoin said, as a parent, you're responsible whether you want to be responsible or not. If you don't want to be responsible, you give that child up for an adoption. This is what you signed up for when you talk about being a parent. I don't want to hear none of this nonsense about you don't want to take them. I don't care.
You've got a lot of parents who aren't parenting, right?
Exactly. It's called parenting. You're responsible for that child. Man up or woman up or whatever you want to call it, and handle your business. You want that child to have an abortion, you need to take that child down to the clinic yourself. Now, I'm not saying, I'm not criticizing you, Bomb Cherry, for taking on that responsibility, but in all fairness, you should not have had to do that. That should have been the parents doing that. I know that you want to, and I understand that, hey, if you didn't do it, then she probably would have went some way and did it herself, and maybe you wouldn't have been able to supervise that process. So I do commend you for taking on that responsibility. It's a tough choice, but when I'm talking about the parents, I'm specifically speaking to the parents. You know, as a parent, that's a responsibility that you assume when you decide to be a parent. Okay, you're responsible for the health and welfare of that child. So again, when we're talking about abortions, there's complications that can occur, as Shantastic said. So this is the reason why you need to be a part of that process as a parent. You need to assume that responsibility wholeheartedly.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, you're responsible for that child from a legal standpoint as well, not just morally and ethically. Legally, you're responsible for that child.
Yeah, but they didn't give a shit about it. But and it's a lot of kids like that. So I guess I'm trying to look at it from the kids' point of view. Now, from a mother's point of view, I feel the same way you all do. I wouldn't want my child to be able to walk in without me being notified of them having a procedure done. So I do understand your points of view. I'm just trying to look at it from those children, those kids who don't have the support, the parents. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that I disagree with you all. I just see a different point of view.
Okay, so Huda once said, when there's a C-section, an emergency, you can actually schedule a C-section. So that will be a case when it's not an emergency. You can say, okay, maybe you're having twins, so you want to actually you want to deliver the children early because the children are getting big, and you want to diminish the opportunity for complications during the childbirth process. So you say, okay, I'm scheduling a C-section at this time. You go in, the doctor does a C-section on a specific date and time, or you're actually getting past the full term in gestation. So again, let me just remind everybody that I am not disseminating medical advice. This is purely for entertainment purposes only.
Mm-hmm.
But as a child gets past full term, right? Even though the cervix, quote unquote, cervix hasn't ripened, the cervix hasn't dilated to facilitate childbirth via the vagina and birth canal. Sometimes the placenta will begin to separate from the interior lining of the uterus. Or sometimes the actual amniotic fluid will rupture, but the child doesn't begin to deliver. And so now without that amniotic fluid, the child swimming in amniotic fluid, there's complications that can occur for that child if that child isn't delivered, within a certain time frame. And again, this is not my area of expertise. I obviously took this stuff in school, but I didn't specialize in obstetrics and gynecology. I specialize in vascular access. So that's where my area of expertise is at. But when we talk about the actual viability of that actual fetus, or now what's going to be considered a child at this point, that viability diminishes, after a certain point when that amniotic fluid has been evacuated from the uterus. Now, when that placenta begins to separate, you're cutting off that child's lifeline. That child needs to be outside of the actual uterus once that placenta is separated, because that child needs to be able to breathe on its own and actually intake nutrients on its own, because now it's no longer connected to the now the placenta is no longer connected to the mother. Now it's being starved of those nutrients that it would normally receive from the mother. Also, there's a chance of hemorrhage as that placenta begins to separate. It starts to hemorrhage. It bleeds. And you can't. There's things that can be done to stop the bleeding, but not when that child is still inside the uterus. You got to get that child out. So these are the reasons why somebody would do a C-section. Now that may be considered an emergency when the placenta begins to separate. But prior to that, it's not necessarily an emergency, but there is a sense of urgency, and you want to actually take that child out if you're not able to deliver that birth vaginally, because sometimes you just can't get the child out vaginally. Maybe the baby's in some type of obscure breech position and it can't be repositioned by the physician, or maybe there's some type of risk with the actual the umbilical cord. Maybe the position of the umbilical cord is making things tricky. So these are reasons why you would get into a C-section. And sometimes you just get a C-section because you don't want to carry that child to full term. So where the doctor thinks maybe you're having complications, maybe you're having what's called eclampsia, where you're having extremely high blood pressure as a result of that child, or you have gestational diabetes, where that child is extremely large for its gestational age. Like you may have a child, you may be only 6 months, but your child is the size of a 9-month-old child because you have gestational diabetes. And so there's an enormous influx of glucose that reaches that child, and now that child is super large.
Right.
And so sometimes you have to deliver that child early. And again, I am not disseminating medical advice. This is purely for entertainment purposes only.
But
I don't specialize in obstetrics or gynecology. I'm sorry, Shantastic. I have to make that disclaimer.
Yes.
Because you know how people are these days.
Yes. I do agree. But I was just going to add, all of those are common reasons, but most of them are not emergencies.
Very, very true. I just wanted to give him some of the backdrop because he was asking, let me go back to the question. When isn't a C-section an emergency? I just want to clear that up for him because sometimes.
Oh my God, I can't hear him.
Okay, so at any rate, like I said, I don't want to keep this stream going too long. If it's an issue that we have to revisit at a later date, we got all the time in the world. We will have to revisit the issue of what was the issue that I was talking about? Like the actual child support.
Right. The rights, child support.
We'll have to do because that's a whole separate stream. We'll need some time for that one. So we'll discuss that at a later date. Maybe we can kind of reconvene and decide upon a good time to do that when we're all available, because I think we all need to be here for that particular subject. But I just want to go down the line, starting with Bomb Cherry. And if you want to give any closing statements before we close out.
Okay, I want to say thank you to you. This was a great conversation. Yeah, I learned a lot. I like having conversations where I learned a lot. And I'll definitely be on the next one if you invite me.
Yeah.
And Bob Cherry, you know that you're always invited. Again, with this Google Hangouts, sometimes it's hard to kind of connect with people. That's the reason why I gave you guys my Instagram, because it's easier for me to actually send a link and kind of stay in touch with you guys and say, hey, what are you doing? Or if you have a better way, like maybe you guys use WhatsApp or whatever messaging service that you guys use. Maybe you guys use Facebook Messenger, but you guys have to put that in the Google Hangouts link chat. So that way I'm able to efficiently contact you. So that way we can make sure that you guys are on the panel when I start the actual discussion. And Bitcoin Brian, let me go to you. And if you have any closing statements, if you want to shout out your channel that's in the process of being constructed, please do so.
Yeah, man. I'd like to thank you, man, for having me on, man. Much respect to you and everyone on the panel. I really appreciate it. I'm honored to be on the panel. Yeah, I'm getting my channel started, man. A lot of my friends, man, and they've been on me about getting the channel started. My channel will probably be more focused on travel, finances, things of the nature. And sometimes if I have a live, I'll, kind of get on subjects like this as well, and then invite people. But yeah, man, I'm getting my channel started. I only got one video up right now. It's only just from about a year ago when I was using my drone. So yeah, I will be having some more content, travel content. I've been over several. I'm like my man Triz. I've been all over the world. And I got a lot of experiences in different countries, and also in this country as well, the United States. So, yeah, I'll be putting some more content out there, man. I really do appreciate it.
Okay, and Bitcoin and Bomb Cherry, would you guys please stay on after I conclude the Hangout, because I'm gonna talk to y'all after we stop the broadcast. Shantastic, that includes you. Did you want to shout out your give your closing statements, and if you have a channel you like to promote, please do so at this time.
Sure. I had an amazing time on the panel. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed everyone's input. It was amazing. And I also learned something as well. My YouTube, I do have a YouTube channel where I vlog and speak about entertainment and different news stories. So feel free to subscribe, and I always return the favor.
Okay. Again, this is Super Triz, and we talking square business today. This is, my channel is about the perspective of the average man. When I say average man, that means that I consider myself to be somewhat of a law-abiding citizen, gainfully employed, and just like everybody else. I don't promote myself to be a pimp or not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm not a drug dealer. I'm not a rapper. I'm not an entertainer. I'm just a regular, average working Joe. And I think that, the voice of the average American Joe needs to be heard as well. So this is what my channel is about. But before we cut out of here, I want to give some shout outs to the people that joined us in the live chat. Let me thank everyone in the live chat who joined us. The individuals that did not post comments, I thank you as well. Your presence was definitely appreciated. Black in Japan, I want to thank you for joining me. Adrian Thomas, I want to thank you for joining me. Zero Divide, I want to thank you for joining me. Neon Eyes, thank you for joining me, and hopefully we can get you on the next discussion, Neon Eyes. Dave Tao, again, thank you. You're always welcome, Dave Tao. Thank you for joining me again. Art New Style, thank you. And for those of you that don't know Art New Style is an absolutely positively amazing artist. I've seen his work live with my own eyes, not just the finished product. I've seen the process that goes into creating his artwork. And we're talking not only drawn work, but we're talking about oil painting. Okay. Extremely, extremely talented, lifelike paintings. And again, Art New Style, I talked with you earlier. I talked with you yesterday, and we discussed actually linking together because I'm going to definitely have to commission you for some work. Bitcoin, you're definitely going to have to get in touch with Art New Style because I know that you're going to want to commission him for some work and have some artwork performed. I personally want to get some artwork done on my parents before they pass. And so Art New Style, I want to shout out him. He's definitely somebody you want to look up. He's going to be the person that, at some point in time, you're going to want to have some of his artwork because it's going to be worth something. I'm going to just tell you that right now. Art New Style, Art New Style, Art New Style. Let's go back down.
Post his information. I don't see him on the chat. Post his information.
We're gonna I'm gonna have to get with Art New Style because I want to start promoting Art New Style on every stream that I do. And I'll get with him, and I need to get his specific information, and I'll start posting this information so that way we can promote what he does. He's very, very talented. He's definitely gifted. I'll just say that.
Is he on IG?
Again, I'm not sure. I have to get in contact with him again because I think he's already left the chat. But I just wanted to shout him out because he was in here earlier. But I have to get his information. I forgot to get it yesterday. I was in a rush, but definitely have to get his information. We're gonna link up with him and get that information from him and post it and promote it on all my streams.
Okay, that's what's up.
And everybody else, once I get that information, I'll disseminate it to you. And this is the kind of stuff that we got to start doing. We got to start promoting people in our community that are providing goods and services, especially somebody like Art New Style, who's so talented. I also want to thank Lando Calrissian. Lando, again, we're going to have to link up. Lando Calrissian, if you're still there, you want to post the link to your channel that you're getting started up. Lando Calrissian and Brian, you may want to link up with him too, because Lando is going to be starting a travel channel as well. And so we definitely want to support him in this endeavor. CRU Reality, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for joining me. Hooded One, always a pleasure. Salute to you. STL for you. I think this is the first time that I've actually seen you in my chat, but I thank you for joining me. Your input is always appreciated. And please join us again. Junk Pal Video, of course. I got to shout out Junk Pal Video. If you see him, please subscribe to his channel. Junk Pal is very instrumental in me starting my own channel. He's given me a lot of insight and given me a lot of advice and helped me with some of the technical aspects of bringing this channel to fruition. So I want to personally thank Junk Pal Video. Thank him not only for his contribution to my channel and thank him for joining me. Really appreciate that. Frogbox, one of my day ones. He's been here since day one, since my first stream. I don't know how he found me, but he found me and he's been supporting me ever since. I want to shout out Frogbox. And Shadra Cursa. Shadra Cursa. Shadra Cursa. And Frogbox, no, I'm about to get on you, Shadra Cursa. I got to get on you. Like I tell everybody that come to my channel, you want to start leaving comments. If I see a circle, a colored circle with a letter in it, you are out of pocket. We need to get you an avatar. I don't care what it is. It don't got to be a face. Frogbox got a frog for his avatar. I need you to get an avatar. I don't want to look at no circle with a letter in it. I just don't. Please give me an avatar, please, so we can recognize you every time you come in. But thank you again, Shadra Curse, for joining us. And I believe, okay, Nation of Domination. Where did that brother go? I'm gonna give his full name correctly. Nation of Domination is somewhere in here. Oh, here we go. Oh, Angel Muniz. Angel Muniz has a channel as well. For those of you joining us, if you guys would check out Angel Muniz channel and subscribe to him. He does live streams as well. I don't know if he puts out pre-recorded content, but I know he does live streams quite frequently. So shout out to Angel Muniz for joining us. Bentley 3805, thank you for joining me. Always a pleasure having you. I appreciate your input. You know, I like Bentley because he's definitely opinionated. We don't see eye to eye on everything, but guess what? That's part of the beauty of having panels like this, because we don't have to necessarily agree with each other, but we can always address each other with the semblance of respect. Bentley has always been very respectful, even though I say some things that he doesn't agree with. And shout out to that and salute to that brother for that. Thank you, Bentley 3805. Always a pleasure. Join me anytime. And I think that pretty much wraps up the actual shout outs. Oh, Michelle Powick. Thank you so much. This is a young lady I know in real life. Michelle Powick has joined us in the chat. I know Michelle from Houston, and a beautiful young lady. Michelle, if you want to put your Instagram on there, if you want somebody to follow you, she does work in Houston. She does cosmetic work. So if you need like certain cosmetic procedures done, Michelle Powick is the lady to see in Houston. So please check her out and support her. Shout out to you, Michelle Powick. Always a pleasure. Hope to see you again in the future. And let me see. I think that about wraps it up. I don't see anybody else. Michelle Powick, if you want to put your information in the chat. Oh, Neon Eyes is in Austin. There you go. Neon Eyes, if you're in Austin, if you're in the Houston area and you need some cosmetic work done, here we go. At Butterfly Lashes, at BUDDAFLYLASHES. Again, that's at Butterfly Lashes. If you need some cosmetic work done and you're in the Houston area, make sure you hit up Michelle Powick. She is the lady. I mean, if you send anybody else in Houston, you out of pocket. I'm gonna just tell you that right now. If you're in Houston and you're going to somebody else for your cosmetic work and you're wondering why you're looking like the way you look, it's because you didn't go to Michelle. It's just that simple. That's the lady to see. I mean, there's nothing else I can say about it. If you're going to anybody else outside of Butterfly Lashes on Instagram, you dead wrong. Okay? So on that note, again, thank you for everybody that joined me. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you're catching the rebroadcast. And I'm out. Hang tight, everybody. Hang tight, everybody. Don't leave yet.